Let me, I'll do the official. So it's Monday, June 10th, 2024 at 12:02, and we're calling to order the Vermont Community Broadband Board meeting in person, which is terrific to see all the faces, meet all of you that we've been meeting virtually for all these months in person, which is fabulous. Hello, everyone. Dan Nelson is virtually attending today. We have Holly and myself to represent a quorum. Laura is going to be a few minutes late. She said 5 to 8 minutes late. And sadly, Brian Otley could not join us today.
I think it's important to say that Brian Otley had a immovable memorial service. So it wasn't just a choice.
Thank you. Of course. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, clearly. So let's move forward. We have a good size agenda today. We've done board roll call. Christine, do you want to do staff roll call?
Sure. I guess I'll look around the room and say we got Alexi Montserrat, Tony Clitheroe, Rob Fish, Christina Sweet, Melissa.
Melissa Matthews.
Melissa Matthews. Yeah, I know. I've always got on the list that I'm reading, right? So Heron Herzog, got Tom from, he's our finance person.
Jenny Ray Boyne.
Oh, I want to, Leah, let's do an introduction here.
Welcome, Jenny.
This is Ginny Rayboyne. She just started today. She's going to be working with the board. She's your board resource. And she's working closely with Tony. So, and she's got a lot of experience. I'm very impressed with while we were interviewing, I was Googling her like, wow, town of Orange, you've dealt with tough issues.
Jenny, take a few minutes just to say who you are, where you're coming from, and all that good stuff to introduce us.
So I'm Ginny Rayboyne. I live in Orange. I was the town clerk in Orange for a brief little moment. Yeah, I have a couple kids.
Excellent, welcome.
Puppy.
And she does very nice minutes.
Territory in Orange.
Yes, Washington Electric.
I was formerly the general manager at Washington Electric Co-op and always recognize my towns.
Yep.
Okay, we've done board roll call. Again, Laura's going to be a few minutes late, but we expect her to join us in person, correct?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Approval of the agenda. I'm going to make a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second, but I do have a comment.
Yeah, so do I. So there's a second, so we can take discussion of the agenda. And I'm going to note that the affordability policy item 6 is not going to be taken up today. We're going to punt on that. We're expecting that committee to go back and do some work on affordability policy, potentially July, August. We will resume discussion on affordability.
I think July.
We're planning for July. You want to take a few minutes to say anything, or?
I think it's important to separate the concept that Vikuda has put forward with regard to, oh boy, hi.
Laura's joined us at 12:06 for the minutes.
It's important to separate the Vikuda proposal regarding the legislative committee from the board's accountability policy. Those are two separate items. I'm looking forward to, at the last minute, we've gotten some concrete responses that I hope we take the opportunity to consider. And is there going to be a legal memo regarding the authority of the board with regard to affordability?
Yes, and actually Tony did send a memo out in May to all of us. Okay. But we're going to include that in the board packet for next month so that it's, so all the materials together, we can see that memo with the material for next month.
Okay.
And Tony, that email went back out
May 9th.
May 9th.
So I'll forward that to you.
Okay.
I've certainly read it. It's just to make sure that we all have.
Exactly.
I have another comment about the agenda, I might.
Absolutely.
Tony sent a very important memo to the board and maybe to others regarding the floor of the required rate range under B.
Correct.
I would love the opportunity to put that in the agenda just to review it so that we have noted in our public meetings that we have talked about it. Might be a great addition. I also was hoping, I understand that there are so-called KPI monthly meetings now happening. And I would love for the board to get regular reports on what's happening in those meetings. And in my humble opinion, we could have a conversation about how the board wants to hear the response to those. Because I can envision like elevating 4 bullet points that we monitor at every meeting. And then we dive into conversation if there's variations on the theme. But that would be a subject matter KPI review.
Okay, do you want to include that for today's agenda? Or at least an introduction
Would
to
you
it?
be prepared to do that?
Well, I can talk about the meetings we've had as well as what we plan on presenting. Yeah, let's put it on the agenda as an item.
It could be a short
Yeah,
version.
Let's include that under, let's do that as items after item 10. So we'll call that Tony's memo 10.1 and the KPI update 10.2. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Hearing none, we have a motion on the floor with a second. All those in favor of the agenda as modified, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Guys carry. Next item on the agenda, number 2, is introductions. Christine?
Yeah, there was I think we want to introduce Ginny Raybourn.
Okay, so that was, time slot for Jenny. Welcome again, Jenny. Okay, anything else in that?
No.
Move to item 3, approval of minutes. I'm going to take these separately and make a motion to approve the April 29th, 2024 meeting minutes provided in our packet. Is there a second?
That one I can second.
Any discussion on the April 29th meeting minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Guys carry. Make a motion to approve the May 13th, 24 meeting minutes. Is there a second? I'm going to call it for questioning.
I'll second.
Discussion. Discussion on those meeting minutes, Holly.
No, I did review them. They were very helpful. I will abstain because I wasn't here.
Oh, got it. All those in favor of the May 13th meeting minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
One
Opposed?
abstention.
One abstention being Holly, as she was not at that meeting. And it's carried. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Christine, I'll turn that over to you to run.
Certainly. Anybody would like to make comment, either physically or virtually? Virtually, raise your hand. Physically, raise your hand.
We will limit public comment to the 3 minutes.
3 minutes, yeah.
There's one.
Okay, we've got a hand raised from FX. Go ahead, FX.
Yes, hi, thank you. Today, you'll be looking at some discussions around matches and ARPA funding. I would very much appreciate it. I should say our district would very much appreciate it if board members would ascertain whether or not any decision that they make will preclude EC Fiber from obtaining additional ARPA-based grant funding. As you know, the different pools of ARPA money come with different deadlines. EC Fiber is in a position to spend the money within those deadlines. There's a, I think, because of the BEAD program and the way it's going to work, there are so many unknowns. You might find yourself deciding to pursue a strategy that creates, for example, a lot of BEAD match, then not be able to execute it, wind up giving back ARPA funds and wishing that you had made the decision to put it in the hands of the East Central Vermont Telecommunications District. I've repeatedly said that to the extent that we are able to access additional ARPA funds, that will make our financial picture rosier when we consolidate our early bonds and refinance all that in the 25-26 time frame. When we do that, it's going to make all of the CUDs in Vermont look more attractive to the municipal bond market. So there's a lot of virtue in finding ways to get us additional funding. I also do want to say that I believe that the suggestion that any of the remaining funds can be folded into the construction grant will certainly save both my district and VCBB staff a lot of time, because we'll simply be able to tack those onto the existing construction grant. And finally, I want to thank Christine for stepping in and helping out with getting the construction grant payment schedule negotiated. That was a big hang up for us, and that's been cleared up now. And so, Christine, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Okay, who else would like to make a comment? Krista?
Just a quick question about whether or not you consider the memo on the authority regarding affordability to be a to be a protected document, legal document, or whether it's something that you are considering making public available.
Patty just asked me this morning to put it in the packet for July, so she's ready.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, great. So if we, would it be possible to get a copy before? Okay.
I see no problem.
I'll be happy to send it out.
Super, thanks.
You? Comments? Yes, go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa Birmingham from Lemoyle FiberNet. Thank you very much. I wish I could, if there's going to be a vote on the proposed supplemental, let's see, matching funds to reduce overall universal broadband cost. I wanted to listen to it and then comment. Our concern was being able to access ARPA funds in advance of the deadline. So I'm hoping not to have to make a comment at the end of the session, but I'm hoping to learn a lot and appreciate the work that's gone into it. But on behalf of Lemoyle FiberNet, as we've said before, if there are funds available for construction in 2025, it's not necessarily tied to BEAD, you would like to apply for some of those funds. Thank you.
Other comments? Ellie, go ahead.
Hi, Ellie DeVilliers from Maple Broadband. So similar, I had a question about the match proposal, which was whether or not an analysis has been done, given the suggestion to tack these on as amendments to the broadband construction grants, as to whether or not. Sorry. Sorry. When there's an echo, I can't think. Sorry. So my question was whether or not the terms and conditions of the Act 71 broadband grants would in any way prohibit or restrain what we need to do to use the funds as per this intention. Because it makes sense, but the devil is always in details. And so there was no detail as to that analysis of what are the rules of Act 71 and broadband grants in relation to where the rules of BEAD in the packets. So I wasn't able to produce any more comments than just ask the question, has that been done? Perhaps that'll come out in more discussion.
Anybody else like to make comments? Okay, not seeing any comments. Turn it back to you.
Next on our agenda is item 5, match proposal.
Yep, Rob Fish will take this one.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, everybody, for coming out in person. This presentation is an overview of what staff has collectively worked on over the past few months for how to deploy the $30 million in match funding generously provided by the legislature. So first, I want to start with legislative authority. The original $30 million was to leverage federal dollars and programs, including the NTIA Broadband Middle Mile program. I want to emphasize that including to reduce the overall cost of universal broadband access as described in Act 71. How we as staff has interpreted it, and Tony can elaborate more if desired, is that by referencing universal service plans in Act 71, this limits the recipients of these funds to Act 71 eligible recipients.
Can I stop right here before I stay confused the whole way through? This just happens to be $30 million of additional funding, or is this the return of our $30 million?
This is the return. This is we now have the originally $30 million was provided for match funding. Some of that was taken away due to the emergency with the flooding last summer, and it was restored.
And it was restored with new and additional conditions.
No.
Or
Same
language.
statute.
This is the original statute.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, and it does discuss it. So it's eligible programs are any federal broadband program. So definitions, to get right through that, once again, eligible provider in Act 71, it's communication union district, a small communications carrier, or an ISP working in conjunction with a CUD. Small communications carrier that selected to be regulated under 30 VSA 22.7D. Other things to note is we mentioned universal service plans. The board has approved universal service plans via our grant program. One of the requirements is to have an Act 71 compliant business plan. The other definition before we move forward I want to mention is supplementary funds. We have $30 million in funds. We don't know if that will be enough to provide the 25% match that is required as part of several different federal programs, including BEAD. We'll get more into that in a minute, but we're calling supplementary funds. These are funds from whether they're ARPA, CPF, capital projects funds. There's a small amount of general funds as carryover from Act 9. We refer to it as the broadband financing program. It was up to $400,000 per CUD. And then there may be other ARPA funds. This is all as needed, but we'll get into that. So the program basics. We have been strongly urged to do this program sooner than later and to make it as a technical program as possible. So it's going to be, how we're going to determine how much money is available is going to be formula based. We work closely with our consultants, the Vernonberg group, on coming up with a cost model for what the construction cost would be to finish the universal service plan. So this program is not competitive. It's going to be based on a formula. Once the formula is run, we cannot run it yet. I'll get into that when we go through the next steps. The funds are going to be contingently obligated in the form of amendments, and we will look into that to make sure there's not any of it. Thank you for mentioning those concerns. The devil's always in the details. To the existing VCBB construction grants agreements. This will help us with speed. This will help us with reducing administrative burden for both the VCBB and the CUDs and keeping everything in a bucket. These grants will only be invoiceable upon notification of successfully being awarded a federal grant. But the point is that
say that again. So
the funds are obligated.
Yeah.
But the funds cannot be accessed until you receive a federal grant.
And that means BEAD? I mean,
It could be BEAD, it could be USDA Reconnect, it could be a program that we don't even know yet. So but the point is that the funds will be technically in the control of the recipients, but they will not be able to invoice them, which I'll get to why that's important later on. So I mentioned we're going to use an independent financial model to determine the 25%. The grant amendments, we're going to be looking to execute those before the end of July. Because of the size and the impact of the BEAD program, we want to have all of this taken care of before the subrecipient grant process starts. It's very important that if we're doing anything with BEAD, that we're taking a very objective view of this. It's all in a formula. Everything is in hand before we start the subrecipient process. Because of this time frame, we are urging a board vote today.
Can you talk a bit more about the model and the financial formula? Because to me, it's the black box in the middle of the room. I don't know what it is.
and I agree, and I'm
Okay.
thanking you for bringing it up, because I sort of feel we should be approving the model.
Okay, we do also have Vernonburg on the line. Let me give you the 30,000 foot. And if you want to drop lower, then I'll probably call them in just to make sure that I'm not mischaracterizing anything. But it is essentially a statistical model that's built using all of the FCC data, all of the state data that they've been able to get access to, and including any addresses already covered by other federal grants. Most of these were outlined in state 5-year plans. And so we would then supplement that with data once our challenge process is completed.
Sorry.
Mhm.
Go higher.
Higher. So this
Wait
is a
second.
model.
Wait a second. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is a model. I got that much. Okay. Statistics measuring what?
The cost of serving the remaining areas with fiber.
Remaining after the amount we've already paid for the sites that are supposed to be paid on the built on the existing grant line.
Correct.
Okay. So,
And including
mind
private
if I
builds.
do
in it.
this?
So keep
way,
going, 'cause
Patty?
I
Do you want to?
Okay. Okay. So
slowly processing.
we have
Okay.
we have CUDs. They've been given construction grants. Those construction grants are pegged to a universal service plan, but also a specific number of locations passed, right?
Mhm.
And so now you're taking the locations passed and you're saying there is a delta to get to a universal service plan.
Correct.
Okay. To meet that delta, there is a model.
Correct. To understand how much that delta will cost, there is a model.
So even though we have universal service plans, they're not actually universal.
So that then gets into the data that they're bringing in to understand what addresses are being covered.
Okay. So the reason why I'm confused by this actually is because hypothetically, now, like we could all roll our eyes back in our head and giggle, okay? But hypothetically, we gave the money based on a universal service plan and a sustainable business plan.
Mhm.
Okay. And now we're talking about the locations that aren't covered in that universal service plan. But that is an anathema to the original award.
Well, I think the best way to explain it is the original award funded parts of the universal service plan.
Okay,
So
we always knew.
Yes.
Right.
Even I know it was
Yeah.
always not 100%.
Right.
Okay.
So this is applying to any eligible address that's not funded by another program, whether it's our program or another program, that is remaining to complete the universal service plan.
So it could be towns that are not part of a CD. It could be,
It's,
let me just.
Well,
Look,
no.
No,
we've only approved certain universal service plans at this
it's areas,
point.
it's areas, let me see if I get the words on the table. Is it areas within a CUD's town network that weren't swept up into their number of addresses when they submitted their business?
Think funded versus unfunded.
Yeah, that is a good way to
That they have a
Not
universal
funded.
service plan, but not funding adequate to meet the
To meet
entire
The
plan.
funding, okay.
And
So the
so,
addresses are still part of the plan.
that's
Have
right, so
sufficient
eligible
dollars.
addresses that remain unfunded is the target. Which still, fundamentally gives me gut cramp because I thought it's, we had hoped a sustainable business plan would include a plan for universal service. Okay, but leave that alone. So are we tracking, Patty, you and I? Laura, do you want to?
So I'm now at least understanding the conversation.
Yeah, and I'd like to, at somewhere, understand why we need a third-party vendor to help us figure this out. Because we have a lot of staff and we are dealing with numbers that we generally know or supposedly know. And so I'd like some conversation around that. And I'd also like to know a little bit about why there is a trigger that you have to have a contract with another federal program in order to get access to this money, because that's not an ARPA original
I
requirement.
want to answer that.
Yes, yes, let
We
me
can
say,
get to it later. too.
Okay, I'm just letting you know like where my mind is going.
yes, yes. So to answer your last question first, that's just because that's what the legislature has.
Right.
done. It's a prohibition. And then, with respect to, what was the second thing?
Why do we need Vandenberg?
Oh, why don't
I
we
can-
burn it?
I can answer that
Sure.
one. That's,
Yeah.
that's okay. We could spend months getting lost in a formula. This is something that's tried and true, that's been accepted nationwide, and it also allows us to use a technical approach to the program. Where it's based on facts, it's based on what's been built, it's based on everything from density to the number of addresses. It's based on a larger analysis. Much of that analysis was originally done. It's been adjusted further since then, even with our 5-year plan. So it's more of hands-off, of saving time, of keeping it objective, and moving it forward with something that we feel that we can agree on and that most of the country has agreed on, rather than trying to, like, as I said, I'm very confident we all can spend a lot of time debating the nuances of every single formula. Like Alexi can get a lot more into the
I have no
weeds on it,
problem.
but yeah, I'm just saying that's
I
why I
have
know.
no problem with the idea that the Vandenberg group has developed the formula. Did they develop the formula?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, and it's tried and true everywhere, great, and we understand it, that's great. Are they applying the formula for us?
Mhm.
Why?
Well, they are the experts with it, and it gives us a certain amount of third-party review of what it is that we're doing,
Okay,
which we feel is important in this case since it intersects a competitive federal program, and we want to make sure everything is very transparent in the calculation of how that will work.
Yeah,
Can
that's,
I jump in on a question? The CUD's been part of the process. Do they feel comfortable with this
that,
approach?
Tony, you should ask that question.
Yes, well, we're, we're walking that very fine line, Patty, between B and Act 71. So these are, this is a very careful line we have to draw. And part of the reason that we're trying to Vandenberg, also Holly, is to have that separation. We really don't want staff involved in the design or application of mismatch money at all. We're just trying to take.
Because it is open to most
Open and
other than
competitive process.
CUDs.
We are functioning based on a legislative enactment that requires us to disperse this money, but we need to kind of stand, we're gonna,
Right, I just want to reiterate, it's because of the B piece that we can't give favoritism to anybody.
Correct.
It's a competitive process.
except for the fact that the only parties that are eligible for it have existing construction grants.
Our hands are tied by what the
Or
legislature said.
they're eligible providers.
So you could, so
Could be
this
an
goes to
obvious
FX's question in a way, okay? So you have to be eligible, but not necessarily a current grant holder.
But also, when it comes to the requirements of Act 71, is it can't conflict with with an existing universal service plan. So it narrows it down quite a bit because of where we're at with the program. But I want to mention everything. The reason why we selected 25%, because that is the gating criteria. That's not the criteria for judging applications. This is for being able to access the program. So once again, this is about us making sure we have a competitive program.
And 25% of the model cost means that Vernon puts it through the formula. A cost is established per eligible provider. Then you are willing to fund up to 25% of that modeled cost. Have I got it right?
Correct.
That is correct.
Per eligible provider.
Yeah.
Oh, per project area.
Per qualified project area, or eligible provider.
Okay.
Service
Sorry,
plan, yeah.
Per universal service plan, yes, that's about right.
Okay.
To be clear.
Okay, so you have to be an eligible, so a new eligible provider, Clipchamp Telephone,
The other thing to note
could
is
come in at this, even though they haven't had a construction grant to this point?
they actually couldn't at this point, but not for that reason, but because they accepted other federal funds that are going to build out their entire area. Most of the ILECs have accepted those. This is the enhanced ACAM that
So,
we spoke
yes.
about. So
Okay.
they already have a universal service plan that is entirely funded. So it would also, in the case of, even if the case of, say, well, we're going to use Topsum just as an example here. If they didn't have enhanced ACAM and their plan convicted with an approved universal service plan, it wouldn't end up being able to be funded anyway.
An approved, DCBB
Yes.
approved universal service plan.
Yes.
So effectively, let's just put it on the table, effectively, only CUDs are going to be eligible here because of that rule.
Not necessarily. Waitsfield could also be eligible. We have approved a
Okay,
universal service plan there.
yep,
But that is the extent to it based on the program design and the fact of where we are at a state where we have 218 of the 252 towns are now in CUD universal service plans. So it's just the nature of how things have landed in Vermont.
yeah, absolutely. And I guess that pretty much clarifies it for me, but,
You're up.
I have a number of questions. So, and starting with how things make their way to us. Rob, when the first slide, you talked about, we were urged to construct. Who was urging you?
The NTIA has been very clear that it's very evident that the state has given us a responsibility and has given us a direction on how these funds must be distributed. But it is strongly encouraged to do this before the subrecipient process starts, just to remove
Because-
any potential appearance of favoring any applicant over another applicant outside of what is required by the state. The reason we have selected the 25% is because it is a gating requirement as opposed to scoring. The fact that all of the funds will be with the subrecipients before they even apply, and we don't know what the bids are, protects everybody in this case. We don't want to know what the bid is going to be coming in. We don't want to be moving funds around when we're still navigating who is going to be selected via the subrecipient process. That process is a technical process, almost exclusively based on scoring that we need to insulate as much as possible to prevent it. So that's where all of that came from. But that is where the encouragement. The other encouragement that has come from all of us we've been hearing from since the program was approved is that we need some certainty. We need to have an idea since the match program, the 30 million. We need some certainty to be able to plan. So eligible recipients of this and eligible recipients that are going to be applying for BEAD need some certainty in knowing what funds will be coming in. So
can we go back to the previous slide? So given that explanation,
sorry. Program basics.
Given that explanation, just in the interest of clarity, should that have said at the bottom, a board vote is recommended today?
I think recommended would have been better language there. The challenge is more the time frame. If we want to be keeping on schedule with launching this federal program, that is kind of why the required was put in there. Because if we want to be like right now, our schedule, and Alyssa is the queen of the schedule. Correct me if I'm wrong here, is that sometime the subrecipient process will be starting in August. If we want to, for the sake of admin staff and for running this model, and we also still need to finalize the data that's come out of the challenge process, which will be done ideally around the 17th of June. We need time to be able to do that too as a staff to be able to implement it. So if there's not questions, we do urge, because this gives everybody more certainty and allows us for implementing the program as well.
This is a point of practice. I really appreciate
Yes.
Laura's question.
I agree, and I
So,
apologize for that.
and I want to actually, on both of those words, both the urge and the required, it is my personal opinion that, the staff is much further down in the weeds than the board. My preference would be for the board to be a little further down. That's not where we are. And so in the interest of being very, very careful around our words and doubling back around them so that we are really clear when we're talking about the program, how many programs are you all working, right? So to the extent that you can be very precise in your words, I think that will be helpful as the board is flying at a much higher level than I particularly am comfortable with, but that is where.
Understood, and I apologize if sometimes it's the challenge I have in general of forgetting how much context is necessary for a lot of us, since we've been living and breathing it so much that it's taken over our brains, and that's not the experience that everybody has shared.
Okay, thank
And
you.
given how far ahead of everyone Vermont is, so I hear, we can't actually, I want us to reduce our level of anxiety collectively by removing urge and required from our lexicon. Just, we're going to do our very best, and it just helps us to know what we're doing and why.
So I think that Patty had asked the question. I was concerned about whether or not this model had been deconflicted with the CUDs. Rob, I think you've done a great job explaining kind of the precariousness of the bead timing and that. Nonetheless, I'd like to understand if there's a difference that is anticipated. We talked about Vernonburg having a tried and true formula. What does that tried and true formula accomplish? And is it different than what our CUDs are using?
I think every CUD is using something that's proprietary to themselves.
Can we
and
start with
different.
what the formula accomplishes?
So what the formula accomplishes is determining what they estimate the construction costs to be for completing the universal service plan, and that is covering any address that's eligible according to various federal programs. So we have to use the FCC map as a result of that.
And I think Alyssa, you had something you wanted to add, right?
I was just gonna add that the formula tries to get to a best estimate of the cost based on the rurality of Vermont. So a lot of the models out there are like 10 locations per square mile. And Vernonburg did work to come up with a model that could address the fact that we have often under 5 locations per square mile in these these areas that are still left underserved. And so it's to try and make it a little bit we don't have road mile data, exact road mile data of what's left. And so it's the best way to still have a cost per location that can take into account the percentage of,
It's a lot more nuanced than anything we've been able to use before.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. So Act 71 clearly defines what a universal service plan is and what it will contain. There's a lot of moving parts in terms of where the CUDs are, what's been happening in their districts, what their construction plans are. And so this formula that Vernonburg, that is tried and true, estimates what it will take in a CUD to achieve the Act 71 defined universal service plan?
Yeah, let me answer that, because I think what to elaborate further on what Alyssa is saying, if you look at a 10 passing per mile model, they talk, the NTI kind of talks cost per passing. When you get down to lower levels of passings per mile, you still got to build the fiber to get there. So this is really getting even finer than the estimates we've used in the past in terms of what it takes to get to a rural Vermont address. You know, 3 years ago, when we did this, we were looking at an average of 10 passings per mile. But now, since so much has been served in Vermont, that's no longer applicable.
I want to make sure that I'm being really clear. So what I'm really looking to understand is this tried and true model produces what outcome? And is it the same as the Act 71 Universal Service Plan definition?
Oh, yes, yeah.
So it
It's
produces,
it's a higher accuracy.
so I'm seeing heads.
It'll
going like
produce the
this.
remaining, it'll produce the expected amount of construction funds that would be necessary to finish that universal service plan
As defined by Act
as
71,
defined by Act 71.
seeing shaking
What
heads.
Rob V explain, he's shaking his head.
Well, I'm shaking my head because I don't, it's what the feds believe is required to finish. Within the cost of feed, remember the feds want to declare victory that they serve every address. And so they've come up with a model that allocates funds to every address. It's not an adequate amount of funds to every address, which Act 71 was. So I'm shaking my head because the dollars per address that this model may spit out may be different than what we've been calculating in Vermont.
Right, this is, I'm trying to understand, this is what I'm trying to understand is.
No, we don't
is
know.
the
We don't know the
outcome
model.
Of this formula, the same, so I know what the outcome is of the universal service plan. How much does it cost to cover all the unserved addresses? Yes, that's a moving target, but literally, how much does it cost?
Actually, we should stop right there because our plan for serving addresses is not, for example, the same plan that's available under BEAD
It's not.
at all. So, and if this is nationally applied model, they're not applying the Act 71
Well, I think
standard.
that's a little dangerous in national flag. Is this an NTI model
We
or a
need to get
Vernon
more
model?
into the legal analysis.
I think that's what
we need to go into.
Can I add one answer to your question from
Go ahead, Ron.
we strongly support the aggressive timeline staff has put into putting this program on the table. Last 2 meetings, we asked the board to accelerate attention on getting a model out there or allocating remaining ARPA funds in this $30 million. The fact that we don't have all the details on how it's going to play out should not stop the great progress they've made. We are eager to see the actual formulas and to see how they work. We are definitely, like you, concerned about that. But we're not going to get there today. We strongly support the aggressive approach these guys are putting forward to get a model built, have Vernon build the model, and to get the data in front of us so we can all talk about it.
Yeah, so I hope everybody understands my question, which I feel like it's a very simple question. The tried and true formula produces what outcome? And how does that compare to the universal service plan, which produces a cost for covering every address, every eligible address?
I think Alyssa is going to answer that.
An actual.
So
cost.
I think I get what you're concerned about, and I've been concerned about it, maybe more than anyone else in this room. And I think the idea is the formula is applied to our data. And so we can apply it to a universal service plan is a boundary with E911 addresses and broadband serviceable location addresses, right? And so we know the difference between the two programs and the eligibility of the two programs and what those addresses, where they match, where they don't match. So we can apply the formula to
Act 71 criteria.
both, yeah, or both, be inclusive of both sets of addresses so that we're not leaving any locations out.
Maybe a good word to use is the model is customizable.
So what is the outcome of this model?
The outcome is going to be the amount of funding that is provided that based on the model, we're
Provided.
estimating should be 25% of what is necessary to match a federal program. to and that's what it comes down to. It's linked very much to various federal programs or various federal grants.
It's making me itchy the way you're saying that. Okay, so I'm going to try to translate. So
Thank you.
you're saying 25% of eligible federal programs, but it's the construction cost for the eligible locations remaining in the approved Universal Service Fund plans.
That is not what you said.
That is not what he said, but that's what he meant.
Is
Okay.
it when you,
Yeah, it's the estimated amount that would be applied for reaching those addresses.
that would be applied for? And so is the amount that would be applied for adequate to cover the costs of what is necessary to build the lines?
That is something that's not, that's something for, we don't know. This is kind of, is probably the best answer I could give. Because that's something that would require for us to know the exact bid and estimate of every applicant that is applying for BEAD. So that's why this is best estimate.
And so then, let's see what my other questions are. Just finishing up on this then. So what, I think what I'm concerned about is any obligations that this formula, this tried and true formula may create on future funding in universal service.
Oh, so.
Yeah.
Well, just if it's, if we're, will it, will be used for any other determinations?
It's at this point, it's just for match for those programs. Those programs may put conditions.
Yeah.
On funding for the addresses that they fund, but we're not proposing any additional conditions on these funds.
Okay. Can you remind me of the ACAM speeds?
It's 100 over 20 is required, but everybody in Vermont has pledged to do 100 over 100.
Everyone in Vermont
Everyone in Vermont that has accepted enhanced day camp.
has accepted 100.
Yes, so this is everything from, yeah, and I think, let me know if I'm forgetting anyone, folks, but that's
Fiber, accurate.
I don't know that there's another technology that delivers 100.
but VTEL has not wireless, VTEL, the Vermont Telephone Company, has accepted enhanced day camp. GoNet Speed has accepted enhanced day camp.
For wireless?
Topsum has accepted enhanced day camp.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of who else there is that has. I remember who hasn't, but TDS, yeah, TDS.
I thought VTEL was fiber already.
There's based on the FCC map, there's probably a few addresses missing, but I would say a handful might be generous.
I have one more question around the Waitsfield Universal Service Plan. Did we ever see that?
What was an exception? Somebody said, was TDS an exception?
Did we ever see, are there other providers that have submitted universal service plans?
The only grant we've approved for a private
Oh, that's,
provider directly is for the non-Maple areas of
Yeah.
Waitsfield.
thank you.
Mouthful.
Okay.
Sorry, Roger.
And I think that's it. And thank you. Great job. Just really, really want to encourage us as the board is so high up. We are as precise as possible.
Sweet, they're so high up or so down below.
No, you should know, we appreciate this. We're trying as hard as we can.
Well,
No,
we're
it's
not gonna
very-
get to a decision today if we can't fill
Yeah,
it.
no, this is great. 'Cause as I said, like we're down in the weeds and we could very well overlook something that.
Okay, so I have one follow-up question to Laura's question, may I? Okay. So under B, there's this opportunity to provide wireless and to serve addresses that are not eligible addresses. Eligible under Act 71.
Okay.
Pardon me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for example, off-grid. So when we're using this model to apply for federal funding, AKA BEAD, and for 25%, how are we reconciling the obligations under those other federal models?
I think.
I-
Alyssa seems to
I
answer.
think the best answer, my best guess at answering that right now, without thinking about it more, is that we've matched E911 addresses to broadband serviceable location
Yeah,
data. And so,
this could be a Venn diagram.
yeah,
The total
Right.
under those other federal programs, the total under Act
Yeah.
71, that are unfunded.
Yeah.
It's match for that, right?
Reality.
And then there are always, so when it says 25%, it's 25% of a certain population, not everything that would be required under that other federal program.
I mean,
Okay. Tracking.
Are we good to move on to a few of the scenarios? Don't worry, there's only a few more
Do you have any
slides.
questions virtually?
Okay, Dan. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dan's got it all.
We've got it all under control. So there is a scenario in which the 30 million is not sufficient to cover that 25% cost. And given what we're setting as our priority is to remove the gating criteria that would prevent somebody from being able to apply for federal funds, we may need to supplement it with additional funding. Since we will be able to run the model sometime in July, we will know what that is, but we are also asking to supplement that as necessary with, this is where we get intertwined with the later conversation on the ARPA CPF funds, just to be clear. We have a 1.5 million that is remaining in the broadband finance program. So it's the $400,000 grants. So that is one place we would like to start by supplementing it from. This is rollover funds from, it says 2021. I think it might have actually been 2020. We have right now, we currently have 2.7 million in unallocated ARPA funds. So these are ARPA funds that are not part of what we're considering our admin expenses and have not been formulaically put into the pot for funds that can be applied for by specific eligible entities.
So it's not taking funds away from any.
Exactly. Exactly. That was a
Or,
much easier way to say it.
or BCBD operation.
Exactly. And then, and this is very much connected with a later conversation, but just as a preview, we are going to be asking across the state, if you are an eligible entity, if you're a CUD, if you're, it's kind of looking at Roger over there, and all the folks online from different any provider, if you have an allocation, you need to let us know with a letter of intent that you still plan on using that. If not, come August, those funds could, all else failed, be partially released to maximize the percentage to try to reach the 25%.
Okay. Being a selectman, the town of Corinth, I know a little bit about allocation versus appropriation versus obligation under ARPA. Okay. Are you talking to CUDs that have, I mean, are you referencing grant recipients, ARPA grant recipients that have not what?
So if there is remaining pre-construction funds or remaining construction funds or remaining materials funds
That haven't been applied for.
that haven't been applied for yet, they're not uncovered under a grant agreement yet.
Yeah, and how much do we have in that category? I know there was talk about it at the last meeting.
Do you want to preview that right now?
Yeah.
We have a breakdown. So
Around 2 million.
Okay.
well, 2.7 is the unallocated,
Yeah,
but there's how many millions?
probably around 2.5 million.
We're looking for the higher number now, though. That's not within a grant agreement at this
Yeah.
point. No, I don't.
Yeah, because that includes it's mostly CPF.
But I'm more speaking of I know for instance, Krista over there, they have about $25 million left.
Oh,
That
yeah.
hasn't been, so I'm looking at the number that includes all of that funds that we just need to be notified if you're not going to use it. Because it's like, there's some funds that are hanging out that are materials
Okay.
funds that might not be used.
But Tony, allocated, but just hanging out there, okay?
Available to be applied to.
Yeah, not obligated is the right translation, right? So
All of our
how in the
remaining
world
is 32.
would we
32.
get that obligated
Mhm.
in this time frame as part of this program?
Let me,
Grant amendments, construction grant amendments.
You guys are just not gonna do anything else for the next 6 weeks.
But let me pause. Did you hear the word she said? Non-obligated funds.
Not
Which is-
Yeah, these are
obligated.
non-obligated
But
right now.
so see,
They're
$32
available.
million.
but we-
That's
but
$32
any-
million, yes.
But NEK is, do we?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, NEK, Lamoille, WCBT needs to come forth with a request for an amendment to convert those funds that are allocated or promised
Oh, I
or
see.
set aside into something that is obligated. And we will be asking officially that we be notified of that by, I can't remember what date we're gonna say in July, but we'll get to that later in the other
So
presentation.
that pathway is really important to document
Yeah.
by written format, not phone call. Needs to be very clear.
Exactly.
And timelines need to be included in the correspondence. Because we're essentially, we're moving money around. So we're telling people, if you don't use it by this date, tell us you're going to apply for it, it's gone. Is that fair?
Yes.
That is fair.
But
Fair
telling us,
characterization.
But it could be
But-
gone, I guess is the way to put it. But
yeah, except, okay, the actual deadline for obligation is the 31st, right? Of December.
Correct.
for ARPA SFR, not for
Yes.
ARPA Capital,
Okay.
what we have remaining is almost exclusively ARPA Capital Projects Fund, which does not have,
Yeah.
yes, that is all.
It's only $1 million or so.
Yeah.
We had to move things
We have a
around.
really
Yeah, we had
exciting-
obligated a
exciting
tiny bit
pie
more.
chart.
So we're good when it comes to SFR. It's
Yeah.
route.
So the
Yeah.
train wreck I'm anticipating, or I'm feeling anxious about
Yeah,
is,
that's great.
that there's 32 million out there. All you have to do is, as a CUD, tell us whether or not you're going to apply
There's a second part.
for grant, because that would put the board in the position of approving grants in hyperspeed in order to meet the availability requirements under this program, correct?
So there's a second part to this. Yes, they have to let us know. We're asking to bring forth in August or September a grant application. We don't believe that we're going to be going far into those amounts of funds. It's also useful to note of that 32 million, 25 million of that is NEK. It's like large chunks and then very tiny chunks. So it's not, and based on our initial conversations, we're not expecting very much of that to be remaining. At the most, this is a guesstimate, I would say between $3 and $4 million could be remaining if things all fall in one direction. So this isn't a large pot of money that we're talking about that is remaining. I can't believe I'm not calling that number $1 million. It's not large.
Even
but-
$1 million, I mean,
Yes,
our legislature.
it's crazy to think about that.
Yeah,
Yes.
would love not to talk about $1 million as chump change.
Right, but all of this won't matter, and it'll matter for the later presentation, if we do have enough with the 30 million. We just don't have the numbers yet. We're still working on all the data. If for some reason that even with all of that, it's not enough, we're gonna be, so we want to issue the grant agreements by the 31st of July. We can reduce the percentage to 24%, 22%
Wait,
instead of
which
25
grant agreements by 31st of July?
for this match program.
So we would have to approve them.
Like next meeting?
Well, the approval is, in the motion that's prepared, it is giving us the ability to move forward based on the formula, since it's not a competitive program.
That we have never seen, don't have the results of, don't know the outcome of.
It's, the blindness actually helps in many ways here. And
Yeah,
we can't get it.
Hang on,
Unless you have a fiduciary duty, and
Well,
that's kind of a problem.
we'll have Tony explain. Tony
Yeah,
can-
Tony, please explain
Tony
that.
explain why that blindness
Less
is.
Yeah.
terse terms.
Right, this again goes to really the farther away we are into going into BEAD, and how much anyone gets for BEAD is for the better, Holly.
Yeah, I hear you, and I know where you're coming from.
So
Yeah, I'm not there yet, so.
I just want to wait
I'm
for.
not agreeing, I
Yeah.
just hear.
I think NTIA was clear that it's a competitive environment, that there was a
Yes.
risk for us to be too close to it.
it seems very difficult to get over the idea that this is not competitive, though, given that there may be criteria that are objective, but the fact that multiple parties are going to be wanting the money that might be allocated to other parties, it just is competitive by nature.
Well, that's
So-
where the formula comes in.
But we are trying to create an objective process. I hear that. Yes. Okay, I have a comment about all of this. Maybe I'm just a remedial learner, but I would so appreciate voting on the program without all of these contingencies about it. Then we'll take from this, and then we'll take from that, and then we'll take from something else. Because actually, we could be doing the program approval without having to plug the holes in additional funding until we hit a different meeting. This could be more simply structured so that we're not pre-approving reallocations of funds 6 ways from Sunday. It's one thing to give staff authority to apply a formula and to get the input from what the need is and then allocate what the funds would be. It's another thing all entirely for us to zip through reallocation of funds under other programs in other allocations. It would just be easier.
It's very complicated when you play it out.
Yeah, can
I'm trying to get my head around it.
we have a draft motion on the next slide after I get through this one, but I agree. I think there is an in-between option that could be more comfortable, let's say. So the other scenario that we worked through, we were trying to figure out how to do is, so say we obligate these funds, we've provided XYZ company $20 million, and then they are not selected by their federal partner for receiving the grants. What do we do? So that was why there's the trigger in there that they can't invoice the funds beforehand. Upon such notice, we'll deobligate the reallocation of funds. It could even be potentially something in the grant amendment that makes it automatic, but I'll leave that to the experts on that. The first step we will do in that case is we will reallocate the funds to ensure that we have at least the 25% match to all eligible applicants. Remind you, this is after the subrecipient process now. So this is substituting and replacing funds. So this would include replacing any funds that we had to borrow from other programs. If an applicant had to take out a loan to reach the 25%, because that's the thing. We don't know what if our formula is going to be, if we're going to be able to do that.
Recipient.
Recipient.
Set up.
Okay, at that point, they'd be recipients, yes. We also, like as I said, with this is supposed to make broadband more affordable. So we want to be encouraging grants versus loans where possible. So maybe we can replace the 12% loan with funding that has come back. But at no time we're going to end up having where at the end of the process where anybody's going to be receiving more than 25%. So we're keeping it as a gating criteria, but that mix of funds could change.
And 25% of the estimated project cost to complete the universal service plan.
And I have 2 questions. I want to go back to something you said. We want to use grants more than loans because we're trying to keep.
Well, one of the things in the very first slide here, I'll go back to the very first slide
No,
here.
just say it.
Reduce the overall cost of universal broadband access. You reduce the cost,
Why?
which includes reducing the interest, the payment you'd have to come
Yeah.
with that.
And why do we do that?
Why do we do that? Is the end result is a more sustainable and more affordable network.
Oh, affordability.
Yes.
What a good idea.
Yep.
Okay.
So see how it's all connected?
So just wanted to be clear on that. So the
Where are we here? We didn't know anymore.
then but the other part that you were saying, the 25% match and where the source of that is, this is like an exercise in hyperspeed. This is where I would love to hear from the CUBs, like, really? You got 25% match of a maybe estimated amount sitting around such that you can make an application due by July something? Is that what we're talking
There's
about?
no application that would be due. All it would be is saying that it would be an application saying that you're applying for this program. for match funds for federal programs.
Okay, and so you're gonna name that you're applying for this 25% match, the source of your match,
The source of the match, yes,
and
we're doing it all at once.
and the target and the target for your federal program that you're going to be applying for.
Yes,
Is that what it takes to get approved?
yes. We were trying to keep this simple to be able to get there, because in
Is
terms
there
of the
any
requirement for,
review of the recipient's current compliance that's part of this evaluation?
well, with any amendment going out, there has to be a review of compliance.
Okay,
So that's just a given for any award we give.
thank you.
Almost there. This is what once again, I made the assumption board approves. Apologies. We will be emailing the Act 71 eligible providers with universal service plans. Writing a letter via email is what we were planning on doing. We can do a written letter if that's preferred.
You should have.
Yeah.
You should have.
Yeah, legal
you
letter,
can- you
right.
can Send it by email. You need to have.
Yeah.
a written letter.
Okay, yes.
I put in the body of an email, hey, what are you up to by
We-
July?
We will have Tony,
Yeah.
we will have Tony draft that letter.
TikTok's not gonna work. July 4th.
Yeah, so it's right now, we're saying July 1st that we want a response to this, that we're moving quick to who's interested in accessing these match funds. We will be submitting June 17th, the results of the entire challenge process, the results of the truing up, all the data work that Alyssa has, God bless her, has been buried in for the past few months. Nice to see you again. We will then run the Vernon model to determine the 25% amount. The July meeting, we can give a little bit of an update to the board. This is where I get into where I think we may be able to come up with a way that's more comfortable. At that point, we will know if the 30 million is enough. Then once again, the funding is obligated no later than July 31st is the goal.
So in July, you can flip back. In July, you can report to the board kind of all of these things that have happened. You know, like here's the results of this. Here's how the allocations went. So there's no reason why that can't be reported to the board.
As long as it can be modeled in time in terms of the amounts at that point. That's the one thing that I'm sure I'm looking, I'm kind of looking at you.
They said it was a couple of weeks, but
So
that there's going to be more fidelity to that number once we
Say
have the actual
go.
data.
So even if we're not approving these, I really would like to see what the effect is. And have some, even if it's a short meeting where, you know, if for some reason, and I'm hearing that there's urging for board not to make the determinations around this, although that is a larger conversation that I'm quite interested in, since BEAD is a program and VCBB is not BEAD. So I'm interested in what we can, I would like to know before this is done, even if we're not approving, but we've just been informed.
You can do a report.
Yeah, I think
it could be in the weekly.
let me know.
With an opportunity for questions. So, I mean,
Yeah, no, I just.
Yeah, we can figure something out.
Yeah, we will.
Figure something out.
We
with that.
will.
That's
I
not a
would
problem.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Reading this.
That's not a motion. I have a proposed motion.
I appreciate that.
I move the VCBB board approve a match program for ARPA funds of up to $30 million that is applied to designated universal service areas approved by the board, that for the cost of unfunded eligible locations under Act 71. Stop me when I get it wrong.
Stopping in the very beginning, it's not ARPA.
It-
This
It's
is
not ARPA funds that we're using.
This 30 million?
Yeah,
It's not
it's
just the
state
general
funds.
assembly.
Oh,
general
right.
funds.
That's a technicality. It was.
Like you say,
Yeah, it is. It is.
We're doing good.
There's state money now. It's state money now.
With that
Okay.
motion, we
I'm
can
starting
agree
out-
not talk
I'm
about
starting
what
out.
we're doing with the rest of the
Duly
funds.
noted. Okay. I was looking at the original source. So I move the BCBB approve a match program of up to $30 million in state funds. What is the citation to those? To that? Yeah, fill in the blank for the appropriation. Okay,
You go slow, I can try to just type it.
how much slower you want me to go?
Or I guess, dare I say start over, or is it everybody's
Well,
fine?
I think we're good. I think the recording would be
Okay,
probably
good.
your best source.
Yes,
Okay.
okay.
Fill in the blank on the citation of the $30 million. To be used in funding eligible locations that are unfunded under Act 71 in the VCBB approved designated universal service areas.
Make one thing unfunded under Act 71 or any other federal program.
Yes, not ACAM, not, you know,
What is it? What, for example,
Enhanced ACAM primarily.
they're not going to be eligible. Actually, it isn't going to be a location
I guess
that's
they wouldn't be
eligible.
eligible at that point. So. I guess- I
Well,
guess
you know, eligible or funded to be, you know.
Unfunded applicant, did he say an unfunded eligible location? I don't know, I'm sorry.
No. Okay. In which an applicants, are we applicants at this juncture? Because we're talking about people who have approved grants, right? So these are grantees. In which VCBB grantees request 25% of the cost to construct the unfunded eligible locations and swear on a stack of Bibles, and show that they have or will have funds equal to match the 25%, and that the grantee will apply for and designate the source of federal grant federal grant program, right? Like name the federal grant program, okay? Providing the grantee is determined by VCBB staff to be in compliance with its existing VCBB grant.
Someone want to read that back?
No,
It's on the recording. It's on the recording.
so I have a couple of questions.
can somebody second before?
I'll second it so we can discuss it.
Okay, so designated universal service areas, I don't know that that's a term. So,
How do you call it? A universal service plan?
Approved universal service plan.
Eligible, unfunded eligible locations in,
an approved universal service.
yes,
And then what is the date? What is the date? So, this tried and true formula will be as of what date?
yeah, the eligibility of the sites
Good.
unfunded have to be
On
determined
what
by a
date?
date.
It's construction.
It would be,
July 1.
June 17 is the day we're doing it. I don't
Yeah,
know.
so we could do July 1.
So as projected for July 1.
Yes, it's funded, so. Been reported.
I mean, to accept those amendments to my lovely motion.
It's Act number 3.
I will second those amendments.
Alexi, as the knowing everything and anything about bead, do you see any challenges with that?
No, I think that works.
That motion works for staff.
The only, when you said that they have to, I think you said that they have to prove that they have 25% match available. Was that? I just
Have
wanted
or
to-
will have?
As a result of this.
Yeah, that's, they don't have to have it beforehand. That was the only thing I
No,
wanted
or
to make
will
sure
have
that was
a
understood.
match. I think you just want to know where it's coming from. It's gotta be credible.
We do
Right.
have one
But I'm not-
suggestion and one concern that maybe we shouldn't use current grantees. Maybe we should just say Act 71 eligible entities with an Act 71 approved plan. Like it might be a better way of framing it because it's gonna have the same results otherwise, because otherwise it could be seen as we're limiting it further. If it's gonna be limited, we want it limited by,
If that makes
The
you feel
environment.
better. I mean, any fool will
I
know.
think
what that
NTA
means.
might feel better about
They
it.
may not come in, but they haven't,
right,
they're
right.
still in planning.
From a data perspective, I feel better.
That's fine.
So Patty, I'm sure that there will be grooms, but this is a lot and the board is like, this is kind of like the board's official action on this. I really would like us to have the motion so that we can read the motion. So if we maybe just take a small break or whatever to have Polly and whoever was typing.
And you better stick around too.
Use the
It's your-
restroom.
Okay,
On the way
come,
out.
come back.
All right, let's do that. Let's put
Can
it
we do
in.
that? 5 minutes?
Let's put it down in writing so we can all read it.
This one want to put right into the presentation so people at home can see the words too.
Yes.
Sounds like
That
a
would be
great
awesome.
idea.
That would be awesome.
Who is writing besides?
Dan, do you have any
Yeah,
concerns?
I can type it. So when I come over here, I can just type it into the presentation. Stop shaking.
Or I'll-
No,
Stop.
Nobody can take
I
a
would
break.
like to
It
hear
would be
from Dan
nice.
Nelson.
It would be, yes, I'm hanging on to this, but it would be nice if the proposal was written so I could read it,
Okay. Got it.
Thank you.
please.
That's a suggestion.
Okay,
No, not the amount. Yes, not gonna. No, not the amount. No, just
Select
the
board meeting
name.
tonight after this. Yes.
Okay,
I'll type.
yes, why don't you type?
I'll drive.
You'll drive there. I'll save it in that. You're typing.
But you'll keep me square.
Yes. If that is possible. I'll leave it.
I'm good.
You're back. Turn over your back. Sorry. Sorry. Okay. It's lower. Sorry about that.
No.
I know, I should really.
Karen.
Let us know when you come back.
Here, I'll do it in the screen. I'll do it.
Rob, let us know when we're back online.
Oh, okay, are we still muted?
There you go.
No.
No.
No, we're not.
Mute
Mute
Okay, I'm trying to.
Okay, just a couple more minutes. We want, Holly is taking a bio break. But in the meantime, please read. We're gonna read this out loud, but please read. You can see that up on the screen. All right, Holly has returned. You set to go?
Just 1 second.
One-
We're just changing it.
I feel it now. I feel it.
Draw on.
Okay. Just did that and we have a random comma over here.
There's, should be a comma there,
Yeah, it's still there.
but a space after the comma.
Oh, okay.
All right, it's 1:37. We are back at the table to review this new motion. Holly, do you want to read your motion?
Sure. I move to approve the creation of a broadband construction grant program of up to $30 million appropriated by the Vermont Legislature under Act Number 3 of 2023 to reduce the cost of construction of unfunded eligible addresses within VCBB approved universal service plans. All is defined by Act 71 as determined by July 1, 2024, providing 1, grant funds are awarded by Act 71 eligible. Grant fund awards are awarded to Act 71 eligible providers. 2, grant awards are 25% of the estimated cost projected by a third party model to complete construction of such unfunded eligible addresses. 3, awards are given to eligible providers that each demonstrate that, I wish there was an ABC here, but Rob, if you can figure that out. It, being the eligible provider, has or will have a commitment for funds equal to the grant award before grant funds are released. 2, it, that means the eligible provider, commits to apply for federal grant funding for construction to complete or support the completion of construction of all eligible addresses in the Universal Service Plan. And 3, the VCBB staff certifies to the VCBB board that such eligible provider and additional grant recipient is in compliance with all VCBB grants. That maybe should say to date. At the end of 3. 4, providing such awardees do not draw on grant funds until the match is in hand and the federal fund grant designated has been approved. Grant funds not meeting this contingency will be returned to the VCBB for reallocation.
I'll second that. Further discussion and question?
Do we have a match now just because of the language?
Well, we've used the Act 3 definition to reduce the cost of, in the reference to Act Number 3, but if you like it, broadband construction to approve the creation of a broadband construction grant match program.
Is that true?
Keep us
like?
Well, it would,
better.
it would separate it from the other broadband match or non-match programs. 3A, the VCBB staff has to tell the board, has to be able to tell the board that there's no violation of other grant.
3.1, 3A.
3A,
Whatever.
oh,
What you
3A.
want to be 3A.
Can you make those A's, B, and C under 3?
Not really in real time while I'm sharing for the sake of everyone.
Oh, that's a bummer. Okay. And number 1 is it has or will have a commitment for funds equal to the grant There's the match. That's the match. Oh, and maybe it needs to say
Oh,
for funds equal to the grant.
There we go.
You're right. It's too vague. So number one, under 3A, thank you for changing. A commitment for
I mean, the
funds.
balance of the match, the balance of the fund.
No, it funds equal to the grant award, meaning the grant awarded here, the 25%.
But we have to have as much of the 25% as is going to be awarded. I'm sorry, I'm being stupid. I don't.
Okay.
no.
Equal
Or
to,
will have, and you will when you get it.
or will have, so not in hand necessarily, a commitment for funds equal to the grant award, meaning the grant under this match program. Do we need to say the 25% grant award? to
So
make
is
it
the
clear?
commitment for funds also the award? Because you're gonna get the
Well, the
match by
awards have
having
been
the award.
federal.
You have to have a match. You have to
That's what
show
this
us that you
is.
have a match. You have to show us that you will have the funding for the match.
But this is the
But
funding.
this is
for
the
that.
funding for
That's
the
why it
match.
says. or
No.
will have.
This is,
This is the or will.
okay, so there is a logic problem here that is yet more explanation required.
So this is match money that
Right.
is going to be allocated and
Match
will not be able
Essentially,
to, but you will not be, it's gonna be obligated, but you will not be able to access it until you
Yes.
actually get a federal grant that requires the match.
That's,
Right.
Yes.
So I see the problem. I thought that the CUD or the awardee has to come up with, because we talked about bank loans and other
No,
stuff,
that,
right?
that was more
So-
of the contingencies of.
Oh.
That was,
I
that
got
was
down
what
a
we're not
rabbit
even getting
hole.
in here.
Thank
So,
you for
okay.
catching that. So it's the federal program that you're applying to that's becoming, is the source of the match?
This
No,
is the match
this
for
is
the
the
match for the federal programs. You're being allocated a
It-
certain amount of.
I know,
match
but
money.
it works both ways, right? One is a match for the other, so. one
We're not gonna know about the
it's match,
other.
match. So, so you can't have a commitment for the fund until you do, right?
Software providers that demonstrate that they
It will, okay,
are applying for a federal program.
well, we already
match.
did that. Okay, so it will obtain a commitment for funds equal to the grant award. Yeah, it won't have it. There's no way to have that application in before you do this.
Well, unless it already exists, I mean, it is possible.
Has the
Yeah,
match,
that's
we
USDA,
may
it's
have the match
possible.
money.
It will have a
It-
commitment for funds equal to the grant agreement, but it's something, it will have a,
Yeah, it doesn't need
it will commit to applying for a federal program requiring match.
That's key.
That's B. Maybe we just delete A.
Yeah, I think that's the most straightforward solution.
Yeah.
I think that's right, because I didn't understand that it wasn't a third-party source.
This was where we were getting into contingencies if money is returned, that what we will substitute out, but
wait.
that's a whole other.
Stop talking. My brain can only hold so much. It commits to apply for federal grant funding for construction to complete all eligible addresses that will equal or exceed the 25% match. It's what you need under
That
yeah.
will equal,
or exceed the 25% match award. Yes, there it goes.
okay, it's even more that it should be, well, if it's only, if the match award is only 25%, it has to equal or 75%.
Equal
Right.
or exceed. That, because I'm mirroring the language of
But
Act
then the
number
second-
3 that says that it just, I mean, they were pretty generous in their language. They said that it was the cost to reduce the cost of construction of eligible addresses. There's nothing in our match program that says you have to apply for 100%. It's the federal program that says you have to apply for 100%. Let's say you get 50% of the unfunded eligible addresses in your universal service fund. We could still give you a 25% match. Forget about the federal requirement for a moment. You could get less than the model
Yeah.
tells you, and we would still give you the match.
That's true. Doesn't,
Okay, but it's still making clear that the grant awards are 25%. Okay, I'm just.
No, get rid of the, yeah. Yeah, okay.
Is that-
I think that's right.
Can we go back to the, it has or will? Can we include the has or will language in A, so it's,
No,
That's what
because
that's too.
it commits to
it
apply.
has or,
All it has to do is commit to apply, and then you can't even access it.
so
So you
it has
get your grant.
received or commits to apply for.
This open to any federal.
Oh, so you're
program,
saying you already have it in hand? Okay, so, okay, it has or commits to apply for.
Okay.
Okay.
Other comments?
Takes a village.
All right,
All right, we have a motion on the table, it's been seconded.
And it has, we accept those amendments.
We accept
Some
the
things-
amendments.
Something's weird in 4, I think, unless I'm reading it wrong. So the match is in hand in the federal.
Until the federal.
Until the federal program.
Yeah, I don't,
Right,
so that goes.
yeah, I
into
can just take-
moving-
Yeah,
Just
that
take
goes
that
into
out, okay.
moving A.
yes.
Okay.
So here's the problem. Number 4 speaks in the collective, and we need it in the individual awardee. Providing each such awardee does not.
Question.
Does not.
That's not.
So for our applicants that will be applying for these federal grants, does that language allow you to, yes, this allows you to point to this match that you have available?
It is obligated.
Yes. Okay, great.
All right, any other discussion? Good. Gonna call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Well done, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, one more thing. So Rob, in your slides in the packet, also had under a motion, but we're gonna leave this as a directive for the next meeting. That you're furthermore, staff is instructed. So for the next meeting, staff is instructed to model the costs and issue associated contingent grant amendments to eligible applicants on or before July 31, 2024. Staff will report status of the amounts at the July VCBB board meeting. In detail, all program expenditures in the VCBB annual report issued on January 15, 2025. We want this report at the next meeting. Okay.
And that is your opening to request the allocation of funds from other programs if you need it.
Makes perfect sense.
Plans.
Okay.
It's dense.
Yeah. You may not have heard Alexa say it, but welcome.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you. A special thank you to Holly for coming
Yes,
up
thank
with
you.
that.
No worries.
Okay, let's move now to item 7, which is the paid CD status update.
Yeah, that's going to be done in executive session.
You do have a
Yeah,
public
they'll
session.
do it public.
Oh, you do have a public session. So when we go into executive session, Dan, I'm going to send you a meeting invite. I set the owl up in the next room so we can hear.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Perfect.
So we'll go in, we'll
Okay,
just
so
remove.
the only reason we'll go into executive session is for any contract or proprietary pieces that either entity is uncomfortable releasing in public because it's proprietary or contractual. And
Would put them at a disadvantage.
And 1 VSA 313A14 allows us to do that. So the public piece is public.
Okay, so I can start by sharing my screen for the public portion of these slides. It says confidential on
Um, It's okay. Where,
it. The stuff at the bottom that we're not showing was. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
So NEK Broadband and CV Fiber have had votes by their respective governing boards to proceed with a preliminary merger agreement and preliminary plan and merger agreement. And we have done this because we determined that to do so would be the most cost-effective solution to serving our customers through efficiencies. That's the primary reason. We are committed to providing universal service to all of our communities. We are contiguous, so we share borders, we share the same operator, we share the same construction crews, the same design crews, and we wanted to make sure that we were providing the best costs that we possibly could, the lowest costs to our communities. So we did also realize that there were certain organizational efficiencies that we could take into account. We all need to have sustainability first and foremost. And so in sharing our resources, we can get to the goal of universal service faster. We have staff, we have contracts, we have talents with both organizations, and bringing them together will allow us to collaborate and find synergies more efficiently. This is what we look like today. CV Fiber has 20 towns, and NEK Broadband has 51 towns. Okay, together we will have 71 towns. Current build status. So one of the benefits of merging is to get faster to the revenue bond market. And we are both aggressively connecting customers. Thank you, Waitsfield. They're going to town for us, quite literally. And we are connecting 10 to 50 customers each per week. And this is how you can see here on the screen how many customers we each have. And as you can see, we're going to pretty much double our customers, our customer revenues, our service to customers if we're merged. And we're looking to continue status quo and build more and to build more. Yeah.
Unserved passings means eligible on or underserved.
That is right. Unserved and underserved.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Thanks for clarifying.
It used to say eligible, but people didn't understand what that meant. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is what we will look like when we are one merged C to D. We took our names and we kind of just put them together because that was the extent of our creativity, but it does make sense. It's Northeast Central Broadband Territory. That is the proposed business name going forward.
What is blue? Can you, since we can't see what the detail key on that map is?
That's construction planned in 2024. So that's this year's construction, the blue. The bright active green is our active service area. That's where we have customers and where we are connecting customers today. The orange is construction is underway in these areas. The blue is planned construction for this construction season. And we have quite a bit of Reconnect 4 grant area in that gridded lined green.
It is, what was that?
It is Reconnect 4.
That's the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Okay, yeah,
grant.
Yeah. Could you go back one slide?
Sure.
Just for a second, I'm sorry that So customers today are 652 altogether.
Yeah, and just this was about a week and a half ago. So we actually just got numbers that we have a few more than this. It's getting closer to the 700 mark combined now. We did gain about 12 customers last week.
So
if
you have 652 customers and you have unserved passings of 3140, how is the passing all addresses or only eligible addresses?
Passing
It's-
is all addresses.
Yeah.
3140
So
is
you're-
eligible addresses.
So, you math quickly here, not my forte. So whatever the fraction is of 652 over 3792, that's what percentage of eligible addresses you've served to date.
Yeah, so that would be our take rate. And we're
Yes.
aggressively working toward getting a higher take rate. Our first distribution areas had a higher take rate because of the anticipation.
Yeah.
And we are working on getting our most recent DAs up to that. We were looking at about a 42% take rate in the first 2 distribution areas, which is incredible because that was what we were expecting after 3 years. So it is significantly lower in the second 2 distribution areas, but we are working aggressively to get those numbers up.
And right now you've made, just having done the math, 17%, but that's pretty darn good, I think.
Well, we just opened service. I can speak for CD Fiber. CD Fiber just opened service in October of last year.
Amazing. Okay, thank you.
And I think that was it for now. And I can, Christy, you want to speak to?
So the importance of the timeline and the reason that we're working very hard is because ultimately I'm going to come back to this slide. Ultimately, we are looking to address the importance of BEAD. So everybody here knows all about this slide and why that's important. And the current time frame that we understand is that, we need to have this completed preferably before the pre-proposal window closes, which I think it's not official, but I think that you guys were extending that by a month to 8/24. So we've been gearing towards this 8/24 deadline. So to get back to that deadline and to meet the statutory requirements, we have to have our final vote on Thursday, August 15th. So that is the final vote. As of that date, we will become 1 CUD if that vote is affirmative. Backing up to that, we have public hearings on July 16th. And you'll notice that we have a Thursday, July 11th. So we have added a step to the statutory process to allow our governing boards to do an additional vote, because there was some information that we were not able to provide in the time frame that we had to meet in order to meet the BEAD timeframe. Not everything could be completed by the May 30th vote, which was a date that was necessary to meet the timelines that we're working for. So the vote on Thursday, July 11th is extremely important. I think on both sides, votes were taken understanding that they were going to vote again on July 11th with the additional information that they've requested.
Question?
Yeah.
Do each of you have creditors? It says that the July 16th public hearings will include notice to creditors.
Well, I mean, we all have creditors we generally pay our payables on time, but there's always something that outlasts beyond that, right?
Yeah.
So that will be included. We have a closing.
I'm actually asking if there's lenders involved.
We will have a closing on a lender before the end of June. They know about this.
Okay.
There. So I want to just talk a little bit about what has gone into this. We have 6 working groups that work on this in the areas of finance, communications, construction operations, legal, human resources, and governance. We, as a matter of expediency, just combined both executive committees at the start. That is not the intention for July 11th. The intention is to have a executive committee that is less than 16, because that just seems
Besides, each board needs to vote. Yeah.
right. Well, so the executive committee at the end of the day is the framework that's being that will be finished. So We also will, in the immediate future, retain our brands, but we are looking at whether or not to become one brand. That is under evaluation. We are completing a full-blown new business model to reflect this plus other complications that could not be modeled inside of the NRTC business model, which is a sophisticated business model, has a lot of detail, but it really couldn't accommodate this. And so I couldn't get to some of the threshold questions that I needed without it. So we've hired JSI, which is a nationally known engineering firm, and they are helping us build that model. And the goal is to have that operational within the next couple of weeks. So we have time to get stuff to our boards. And that will include what our combined budget will feed into that model, as well as our projections and assumptions. So there are a lot of things that are happening right now and that will happen over the course of the next 2 months after we finish this, including operational integration plans. Those are already in action as to what they would be. Some of it, including the warehouse system integration, will happen whether or not we merge or not. We are doing an accounting software transition. That is also a big lift, and we're doing that because, frankly, QuickBooks is not sufficient from a compliance perspective for the combination of BEAD, USDA Reconnect, ARPA, financing. So we really need to step up to another plan there. And the other things I've mentioned, including HR policy integration, branding working group, etc. So happy to take questions.
I have a comment.
Okay, Colin, then Laura.
I've been through a merger, and I want to commend both groups for approaching this with a lot of professionalism and transparency, reasonable transparency. And it sounds like an effective model. The only thing I'm going to be excited about hearing more about is how this actually impacts the terms of sustainability under your grants, and whether or not there is, when you talk about having separate brands, maybe separate rates, whether there, you can be talking about whether or not there's integration with regard to service offerings and rates. And that will be, and of course, affordability, that will be of interest to me, but kudos, fast, well done.
Very much. And just to sum of that, not that we have a complete answer, but as part of the BEAD process, we're committed to integrating our service offerings and our pricing plans. But because we know that we are going to be changing our pricing as a result of the BEAD process, we want to make all of those pricing changes at the same time. So that's.
Just want to commend you both. Thank you very much for all the work that you're doing. The VCBB is an organization that's established to help CDs. So I'm wondering, what is the assistance, particularly now as we've got this tricky other federal funding opportunity that's coming? What's the assistance that you are getting from the VCBB's work?
So we've been able to leverage some of the BEAD support funding to help support some of this work. There is, we had to hire some good lawyers, so we have some.
As opposed to all the other ones.
Well, no, sorry, right, that was really bad. Some specific, right, yeah. Yeah. We've also been able to combine our meetings. So we have meetings with the VCBB with both CV Fiber and NEK, so that we're both informed as to what we're working on. And they understand the pieces, we walk through the pieces as we go.
May I ask Christine the same question? So Christine, from your perspective, what is your staff, what is your organization, our organization doing to support this? What are we bringing to the table?
Well, we're bringing to the table our financial knowledge and background. But it is a combined effort. It's a collaborative effort. It's I think we're using all of our brains together on this, so that's why we're talking about these collective meetings. But Alexi has been meeting with them more often than I have, but Alexi, you want to talk about what
You know, I mean, it's a lot of just providing the sort of technical assistance around how this works with the different programs and how it will affect concerns like universal service and business plans, and making sure that all of those things are incorporated into the thinking going forward, so that they can answer those questions you just asked coming out the other side of this in a pretty expeditious way.
Yeah, I would say, echoing what you've already said, I think this has been an incredible effort, Herculean effort on your part to pull this all together.
Truly, thank you for what you're doing for your section, Vermont, all of you, but this is even harder in transition. So, and is there anything else that would be helpful that the VCBB could be doing to support you right now?
I think the transparency, continued meetings will be important as we go through this process. So let's continue our conversations.
As the result of this merger, what will be put in front of the VCBB? So, not even, sorry, new business plan.
So you will see a new business plan that will reflect both. And as a result, that business plan, and well, it's your decision whether or not presenting to you the business plan needs to amend in any way either of our grants. For the foreseeable future, we will be maintaining both grants. We are not combining grants, so we are not yet at this time going to use any NEK broadband funding to build into CV fiber. There are advantages to doing that. There's a lot of, we are struggling a lot with our municipalities and their capacity to do make ready. And we have already done our GMP and BEC and the WEC, right? So we're really,
You're talking about
we still have that left.
Electric utility.
municipal electric utility, not the municipalities themselves.
Right, sorry, the municipal electric. So there is, there's 200 miles of make ready that WEC has completed or GMP has completed in the CD fiber territory. But for now, we are keeping those two things separate.
And if I might, I'd like to ask Tony to pay special attention to whether we can have two grant recipients here where their entity has become one, unless you're maintaining two separate organizations.
So the
So
CV fiber grant will be amended to an NEK broadband, to a Northeast Central broadband.
So the merger plan is to create a new corporation, the two fold up, or
So the reason that I messed those up is there's one that's legal and there's one that's perception. So NEK broadband will remain the legal entity, and so the CV fiber grant will become an NEK community broadband grant. However, we are DBAing as Northeast Central broadband, so that will be, the outward facing on the CUD map. It will have one name. But we have, as you know, grants with U.S. Department of Agriculture, and we have both a grant and another request for financing in with that same department. And so changing the federal entity in this time frame would be impossible.
But I'm more concerned about, and Tony should be the one that tells the board what we need to do and what we need to have in terms of the new entity taking the grant that belonged to another entity. Like, we should be checking.
Yeah, I
anticipate.
anticipate. So what Alexi and I have talked about is in the July meeting that the CV fiber amendment goes on the table, right? And it's here's the amendment, and if the merger goes through, here's the approval for the amendment, and if the merger goes through, here's the approval for the integration or the transfer of the grant to NEK broadband. So I think that's what you'll see.
And I just want that legal opinion to show up that we are doing this.
Yeah.
So
if I may, just confirming that NEK Broadband's current UEI, the unique entity identifier in sam.gov, that's going to be the number
Correct.
for both grant agreements.
Correct. After August 15th.
Great.
If the
And
merger
we
goes all the way
may
through.
have conversations to combine it if it makes sense to all parties.
That, correct. And I have, we will only make a proposal for amendment to combine both grant contracts if I have received approval from our full governing board, either my governing board before August 15th or our collective governing board after August 15th. I don't have the ability to demonstrate that to my board.
So the thing that's, the little bell that's ringing in the back of my mind is we would want, as a board, I would think, in approving a transfer of a grant, to know what the status of compliance is, the status of the entity, what is there remediation that we expect as a condition of the grant transfer? That's the kind of stuff that I'm.
That makes a lot of sense. Christine, can you note that for the parking lot?
Yep, we've got it.
Thank you for your comments there. Appreciate it.
Okay, anything else? Good, thank you very much. Well done, both of you.
Thank you.
Everybody involved.
What's your music session?
If there are no other questions, we require that now.
Right, that brings us to item 8 on the agenda, 2024 budget.
Particularly since we're not approving this.
Right.
That's just information, yeah.
It was only in case you had questions that we couldn't answer in the session.
Okay, so at this point, for the next 3 items, Christina will put together in one presentation.
Ahead of schedule.
And such complicated.
We're just going to go ahead and join the meeting.
Pass on healthy.
Apologies.
Autoplay.
It's on mute now. Take it on airplane.
Pilot is driving that plane.
All right, well, thanks, everyone. Again, I'm Christina C. I'm the Director of Regulatory Compliance, and I joined the VCBB staff back in March. And I'm going to be presenting today on our FY24 expenditures, our FY25 budget, ARPA grants out to date, and our remaining state fiscal recovery funds from our original ARPA allocation. And of course, Tom Malinowski, our financial manager, is going to be helping me out with any questions. So we're going to start with our FY 2024 VCBB operating expenditures. This slide here compares our FY 24 budget with FY 24 expenditures through March 31st, so the end of the 3rd quarter of our fiscal year. So even though we're almost to the end of our fiscal year here, this is showing expenditures up through March 31st. And what
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I just want to make sure I'm calibrated with you for this presentation. So taking personnel, the personnel amount is the entire FY24 budget for personnel.
Yes.
The expenditures are through what's effectively Q3.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's about 75% of the year. And I think I'll happy to answer questions, or Tom can help answer questions about where we think we're going to be at the end of the year. But I would say that we'll probably be about overall 70% of the total budget will be expended by the end of the year. So we're well under budget. And even though, if you look at the total now through end of Q3, we were really about 38% of our total budget has been expended. We think we're going to end at about 70%. And much of that is due to us not spending as much as originally budgeted in contractual costs.
Yeah, we also received a $531,000 VDO grant that we hadn't planned on, which helped us reduce those costs significantly.
What was the source of that grant?
Vermont Department of Labor.
Oh.
It was the grant that the board approved we take over.
Right. Yeah. Do you mind explaining what
Sure.
the line item state contractual is just not resonating with me. I don't know if my colleagues know what that means, but since it's so low.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a lot of the EDS costs. So it's like some of it's like internal costs. So like for example, like for like staff, like for developing certain programs with the ADS agency, Department of Digital Services. Sorry. So so essentially we contract out with them to get certain like IT like related products and things like that. So that's what that cost is.
So can we speak to, is it just that we didn't need those services, or we overestimated what they would cost, or we did it a different way, or we didn't get around to it? Why is that differential so low?
Well, one thing to understand is a lot of the state processes a lot of invoices right at the end of the year. So we don't get it reconciled if you look at the ramp. But we're still going to be well under, as you heard Christina say. Our estimate is we'll come in at 70% of budget. But but there was a number of services we over budgeted.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
and we over budgeted because we weren't sure.
Yeah. Better than the other way around.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, or folks want to take another minute to look at
I
the
know the non-state
expenditures?
That's just outside consultants, right?
Yeah, and contractual costs for some of our other federal grants, or sort of non-BEAD federal grants, like our digital equity planning grant. And I believe that was when the original budget was put together, folks were estimating on the high end and expecting that maybe more contractual costs would be spent in this year that may actually be spent in subsequent years.
And that's where our 531,000 fell into in the non-state contractual, the money we received unexpected dividend from the Vermont.
So that's not shown here though, because it's not part of your budget, but it's also not part of your expenditures. Or did you reduce your
We
expenditures?
reduced our expenditures.
Uh-huh. Really like if it didn't look like that, but okay. All right.
Well, there's still, the money was still spent, right? It just came from a different source.
But I guess what I'm saying is if you got over a $500,000 grant, you actually spent 1.2 in non-state contractual that was reduced again by $500,000.
Oh, yes, yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, so
So
I'm
it's actually 1.2
Two.
instead of 7. Yeah.
So I'm sure you guys all know that, but for us, yeah, a little asterisk with this is reduced, because that's a significant area.
Yeah, we can put an asterisk, we'll put an asterisk on. Especially for the end of the year when we report.
Way back, yeah.
Just making a note of that. Great. Can we move on to the FY25 plan budget? Great. So this is our planned FY25 operating budget, or proposed FY25 operating budget in comparison to our FY 2024 budget. What you'll see is that personnel costs are slightly higher because this accounts for the positions that we have added, including Jenny's position here and the digital equity data analyst position that we would plan to add after we receive our next digital equity capacity grant at the end of August.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Are we, by approving this budget, approving that position, the digital equity data analyst position, or have we approved that position? I don't recall us approving
that was in the digital equity. Which grant was that in?
The digital equity capacity grant application that we the board reviewed, I believe, at the last meeting, and that we have since applied for. So we would expect to receive that award by the end of August.
Thank you.
Okay, we are estimating slightly higher on board costs based on our expenses this past year. And our internal service fees, while it's actually a little bit lower than our FY24 estimate, it does include funding to use the Public Service Department's grants management system that they've recently started onboarding. It's called Amplifund. So rather than continuing to use the system that some folks are familiar with, WiseHive, we're going to jump over to Amplifund. I think it's a much easier to use system overall, and it will allow us to be using one system with the rest of the Public Service Department, and for grants and invoices and all of that, really that grant paperwork can be automated in large part through that system.
Question there.
Yes.
That system was developed by the department or engaged, it has been contracted for by the department. They don't have our criteria.
Yes.
So how, that's a way of grant compliance management, right? How are you going to need to augment that? I mean, you already have one system set up. Like, how are you going to need to augment that in order to make that work? And is that cost of augmentation included?
That so that actually essentially is the cost. Right now, the Public Service Department is paying for all of the cost of that system, and this would be sort of our portion of additional costs, since that system charges based on the amount we're putting through the system.
Okay, so one way to say this is that we're paying for a portion of what they would have had to expend. Are we paying more than our share in order to modify the system so that we're tracking? You know, I don't think they have sustainable business plans as part of a grant compliance analysis. So I'm just looking to this going, yes, yeah, and since you're gonna rejigger or rebuild that system a little bit, these funds are to do that and pay your share, right?
Yes, and what I will say about the system is we're in a good place right now because the Public Service Department is building that system with both input from the PSD staff and input from us right now.
Amen.
So we've been in those conversations really for the past like almost as long as I've been here, and they are aware of both. You know, we had a great conversation, for example, last week on how we may make some payments on our grants on an advance payment basis and some payments on our grants on a reimbursement basis, and they actually allow us to make both kind of payments within a single grant. So it's really it's very flexible, and we also have some support from PSD staff to input our grants into our current grants into that system and our new grant programs into that system as well. Yeah, we're excited about it. And then our contractual costs for FY25, this is, again, I would say a high estimate. It includes some of the contractual costs or that we will plan to award in FY25 through our Digital Equity Capacity Grant. And it also includes contractual costs that we are planning to award to a contractor to help support administration of the BEAD program. And it's really a high estimate because we are still in the process of working with contractors to determine the best pricing for that. So we went high so that we wouldn't go over, but I think we will likely come under.
I'm going to sound like a curmudgeon. I apologize. It's kind of my job here, right? So 3.457. Okay. These, I am understanding that this includes the cost to hire third parties to help administer like the BEAD grant, okay, and the Digital Equity Grant.
Not really. I would say that the Digital Equity Grant is not to administer the grant. It's to do digital equity work.
Okay. That I get, and it's funded by the grant. I have to say, I just kind of hate the idea that we have what I consider a robust organization that then has to pay out to third parties to administer the primary source of funding for which this organization exists.
Yeah, we, if you look nationwide, this is happening all across and
My mama used to tell me, just because all the other kids.
well, otherwise we would have to hire additional staff.
Really?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The requirements are.
OMC is only one.
It is.
Maine has, I think,
Only one guy.
people now.
Yeah.
In terms of compliance,
Yeah.
just to give you an idea, now that we're doing a regular federal program, not ARPA with some of the requirements removed, our amount of funds going out and the amount of compliance requirements related to that is similar to an annual budget that Agency of Transportation manages with 1,400 employees.
And how much money is the agency, how much money do those 1,400 employees manage?
Around 500 million a year.
So we're not,
Or 530 million.
and we're at 530 million. That's a great factoid. Can we put that in writing
Well,
someplace?
I'll get the actual data, but my office mate works for AOT.
Right,
so we
right,
talk
right.
about it.
So from my fiduciary lens, right? Things that are helpful in this respect is how does it compare to the cost of managing money for the state and for other organizations, to your other organization example, on a per state basis, what is the cost of program management on a per dollar of grant basis, right?
Yeah, I can get you there.
And that belongs in our annual report.
Yep. Yeah, I think what you're gonna, as you've heard, you look at some of the states, they have a lot of bodies. We've been trying to balance the full-time employees versus contractual. If you look at some of the other state contractual costs, I accept your challenge. I love that challenge. because
Well, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you love it.
I think what we'll show you is we're well below our average contractual, but we're well below our average from a full-time employee.
So with these contractual helpers, will we get reporting on how each of the entities is doing relative to their grant? We've been requesting scorecard updates, metrics of how they're going, like regular reports of how each entity is complying with their grant. Will this enable that reporting?
Wait, Patty, could you amend that statement? We assume this will enable that level of
Yes.
detail
Yes.
if we're going to spend this kind of money.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the program and grant monitoring pieces of this are going to involve regular reporting on where everyone is in construction. And, we've been working hard to pare down as much as we can the things that we're seeking to contract out. One of the challenges with BEAD is that so much is unknown. Nobody's ever run a program like this. The people who designed it had a lot of different considerations they were balancing that has resulted in a program that is quite complex. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to what gets built. And so that will be a sharp focus.
And Holly, thank you for that correction of wording. This is really important. The board is asking for.
Yeah.
Right now, we're going to say we're demanding more reporting relative to the grants to make sure we don't have anybody going awry, so to speak, and we have knowledge into what's happening. We need to start to metamorphosize from a entrepreneurial, hit the ground running without any kind of boots and belts and suspenders kind of thing. We now move over to a more professional mode, but we need to have that reporting so that we can see what's going on. That needs to be happening sooner than later.
And if this funding, as proposed, doesn't meet that criterion, you should come back. Not for an amendment, but you should reconsider now, because that institutional mode you're
Yes.
talking about is the job for
Right.
2025.
we've been asking for the scorecarding, the KPIs, we need to kick that into gear. So that we're acting as a board in a fiduciary responsibility to monitor. The only way to monitor is to get this data. We don't have that yet.
Thank you, Patty. I will say that my experience on the VCBB has taught me just how very expensive it is to have federal money.
Yes.
Yeah.
Free money. Ain't free.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's why we're not sending money into people.
Yeah.
Are you looking for a motion to approve?
Yes.
Well, have we met that criterion here?
Are you ready?
But could you repeat?
The criterion being that the staff agrees that the funding proposed for FY '25 will meet the full and robust reporting criteria that the board has requested.
Yes, we are already in motion on that. So. Yes, the answer is
Right,
yes.
so I'll make a motion that we approve.
Yeah, I have a question on, is there a recommendation here that we continue our government affairs?
I was just thinking the same thing. Is our government affairs person in the non-state contractual amount?
Are we talking about the person who does like the, yeah, it'll be in the non-state contractual, yeah.
At a flat rate or at an increase?
I don't know exactly the details on that, but I know that we pay per month for the company that provides that
And we
person.
checked in with her for an estimate.
We haven't yet, but we kind of, well, it's definitely within that budget.
Okay.
And so, do you have a recommendation on next year? Because that may be a discussion we want to have with this
Well, we
board
recommend we
in
continue
executive
using
session.
them. We have to negotiate a price
And outcomes.
and outcomes of it.
That's
And
a
I think
separate
I think that's an issue we can present to the board after discussion with them.
So I'll second this motion because we're having conversation about it.
All right, let's make it official. Make a motion that we approve the fiscal year 2025 budget in the amount of $5.549705 million. Holly seconded that motion.
I did.
And we're in discussion.
So if I might continue, just the smallest items in here, but on this topic of the government affairs personnel, I think that was tremendously helpful in that building last year. Also, we were really handicapped by the late start. And so that is the aspect, Christine, I would just ask you to think about and bring to the board sooner rather than later, a proposal for us to think about the coming year and what the board's priorities might be and if we need to contract.
Yeah, you should know, staff is very happy with her support. So thank you.
Christine, do you have any recollection what the budget in like 2021 was for this organization?
We can get you information on the.
Wasn't anywhere near this.
Yeah, like just ballpark it. It was what?
A couple $100,000.
We also have added positions over time, so like we had a smaller staff, we have gotten bigger.
So
It's a lot of work to.
Patty, I think it's a milestone worth noting. First of all, that FY 2025 is actually less than the projected budget for FY 2024. Check. Big kudos, yay you. And as I look around the room, the level of professionalism, the growth of the organization, the seriousness of purpose, which people are applying to their roles, I really applaud this, and it makes me feel good about approving this budget.
Also.
And I definitely want to compliment Kay and Tom for coming up to speed on this, Kay, in a very short period of time. So
thank you.
Yeah, when it was the Rob and Christine show, we had to do all this. How many
Mind
balls
blower.
we put in the air at once? Wow.
Yeah, I like, it's, sorry, it's hard for me to hear all the conversation, but
Yeah,
I'd like to.
the floor is yours, Dan.
add on to that. I'd like to add on to that. You guys, all of you, built the plane while flying it. So nice job.
Thank you.
All right, we ready for to take action? Any more follow-up? Hearing none, all those in favor of the proposed fiscal year 2025 budget, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes carry 4-0. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good work. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, that brings us to item 10 on the agenda, ARPA grant fund availability update.
Okay. So now we are going to talk about our American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, funds availability. And as a review, we had 2 buckets of ARPA funds. The first we received was called State Fiscal Recovery, or SFR funds. And we received 150 million of those funds. And to date, those funds have been obligated in pre-construction grants, in materials allocation, and in construction grants. The second pot of funds we received were called Capital Projects Funds, or CPF, ARPA dollars, and we received 95 million of those dollars. And to date, those have been allocated to construction grants. And one thing I will say is the only reason that I can discern at this point that we have only allocated CPF funds to construction grants, it's not, even though it's called Capital Projects Funds, that doesn't mean it can only be construction grants. It's really about the order and time that we received those funds. So first we received SFR funds, and the first grants to go out the door were pre-construction grants and then construction grants. And sequentially, then the second pot of funds that became available were CPF funds, which have funded construction grants because those were the next round of grants to go out the door. Okay, and what we do know about SFR ARPA funds is that we need to have those obligated in grant agreements by the end of this calendar year so that they are spent by the end of calendar year 2026. And so we're going to really focus on the SFR funds for the rest of this presentation. So this is a summary of our ARPA funds out to date. On the left-hand side here, you can see the total ARPA allocations that would include pre-construction, town match funds, materials allocations, and construction grants, and what the board has approved. So to date, the board has approved $207 million, $207.7 million in ARPA funds, and that does include those town match figures. So those are sort of like on top of what was originally allocated to any CUD or other grantee.
Okay. Of our 150 million, how much is represented in the board approved?
That is actually on our right-hand side of our slide here. So on of those 3 columns here, we've got the total obligated in grant agreements of ARPA funds, 208 million. In grant agreements for SFR funds, and these do include like grant agreements that are going out the door like in the next couple of weeks. So it is 148.7 million out of 150 million. And in CPF, it's 59 million. And I have, I can go back to that slide so you can look at the numbers. But this is all to say that we have actually obligated 99% of our 150 million. So we are, kudos to you. We're doing great on that front. Yes, I can.
So the first column, ARPA allocation, is the combination of both.
Yep.
The ARPA and the capital. The second is what we have approved.
Yes.
As allocations.
What you have approved that grantees have applied for.
So we obligated it saying you need about this much money.
Oh, our allocations are right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we obligated only upon grant approval.
Okay, so our second column is what we have approved grants for.
Yes.
So then now which is 207 million.
Yes.
So now we go over to grant agreements and we've got an obligated column of 208 million. So you've lost me immediately.
Yes, I'm actually a little confused about that too. And I think that may come down to maybe some of the materials allocations and how those were quote unquote approved. And Rob might be able to help with that. The obligated is definitely like, we added up like PDFs of
Okay.
grant agreements to get that number.
So maybe we can come
Mhm.
back to that.
Yeah.
And then the SFR is what?
So these are the grant agreements that are currently obligated with SFR funds.
That's a subset.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's splitting out the obligated line item to what flavor the
Yes.
funds are. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so now can we go back to the difference between the obligated and the ARPA allocations or
In the board approved, yeah.
207 versus 208?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's
I don't-
really 207.7 versus 208.3. So it's like
600,000.
600,000. It could also be partly the materials like transfer between Lamoille and NEK. That could possibly play a role there in like the amounts the board approved, because there was just some really confusing accounting with that materials transfer. Mhm.
It's how we did, this might help.
Mhm.
How we did the materials allocation is we set aside $4 million at that time unallocated funds. Those funds, they were allocated among the different CUDs.
Which is not reflected on what
Which
we're
is
saying
not-
there.
So if they went above what their allocation was, it was taken from their construction grant.
Mhm.
So that might have made things confusing, but it was all accounted for in the pre-construction grant. So it made for all sorts of loop-de-loops with the grant agreements and stuff to do it. We understand the logic behind it, but the implementation side of it was intense.
Is there a way, Rob, to show us this so that in a way that's a little bit more easy for us mere mortals to comprehend and see, like, this is.
Well, I'd even go one step further, Laura, if you don't mind. I don't really want to be around a slide that says the board approved 207 million, but obligated 208 million. I mean, I'm just sorry. Just don't want to go, I don't want to be around that. So can we stamp this draft
Yeah,
in big letters? And could you please show up with a revised version?
Yeah.
It's
The difference is Northwest and Lamoille.
We have more work to do.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. And yet, you know, the public, you know, Howard Weiss Tisman would make some fun.
Yeah.
Come back to us with that.
We can, and it probably does really come out to Northwest and Lamoille.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to just.
I have a secondary.
Yeah.
One person, Holly has the floor.
Oh, I know DB better.
I have a second question that's kind of like that. So I'm looking at the line item for Lamoille. And I'm saying, who made the determination, or is there a material difference between in the fact that they got 2.5 in SFR, but 13.8 in CPF? Does it change their grant compliance requirements? Is there any material implementation difference?
It was one beautiful thing that federal government did. Very close.
Okay.
One was- Those are two different year appropriations.
Okay. Just because they're named something different.
Yeah,
it
so
doesn't mean-
essentially anything that was awarded first in the timeline went to pre-construction materials or construction, and the later grants went to just construction.
Can we go
from
back to the
CPF.
ugly slide?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can.
And it's not ugly.
Oh,
for-
no,
you
and
know,
I
it's like, this is
I
great.
asked about that too, because I was, and I,
So I just have to say that this is something I've been longing for quite a while. And if this also showed, if this format also could show expenditures like grants paid out, like funds paid, not just obligated, I'd be such a happy camper.
That's my next stage of this.
Oh, fabulous. Glad to know it's coming.
Excellent. They'll come back to us with that explanation of why
Yes.
Northwest is, it's only Northwest that's the different one.
And DB.
And DB forever.
Yeah.
Thank you. Those two, why?
Yeah.
Did we?
Yeah, those are-
Well, let's not troubleshoot.
Yeah.
Okay,
We don't need to
Yeah.
troubleshoot here. Just Kay's coming up to speak with them. So.
We're getting there.
It's a miracle.
So, but those are places for,
Yes, those are, and those are places for if we have to go back to the board minutes and figure out what was, if there's some kind of discrepancy in the record we have of what was approved, that might be the case, but it's more likely some of those switches that were made, like between Northwest and Lamoille.
So Kay, if you just, and I understand that you're new here, that given the visibility
Yeah,
for these expenditures, if you would make a practice of stamping things draft, if they
Sure.
are, they're
Mhm.
not rock
Yeah.
solid and tied up.
Mhm.
Yeah, that would really help us.
Certainly.
We can stand corrected in the minutes, right, and then change.
Yeah.
Well, or when you go to post this, I think you can
Yeah.
put draft on it.
We will.
so what is our major takeaway from, what is the takeaway that the staff would like us to have from this slide when all of the numbers are?
Well, we will get there. But the major takeaway and what we can really say with confidence is that we have obligated the vast majority of our SFR funds, which are the funds that we want to have obligated by the end of the fiscal or the end of the calendar year.
And this is to respond to an earlier board concern. How are we doing in obligation?
Yes.
So that
Don't leave
Yes.
any money on the table.
we're not leaving.
But we
money
do
on the
have a
table.
couple million left.
Yes.
Okay, but Dan had a comment.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Dan.
Mhm.
I just wanted to make sure I understood that we weren't asking them to change the slide, but instead just to put the footnote indicating what the discrepancy represented. I mean, the numbers are the
And-
numbers.
Yeah, and it's
Yes.
tracked. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and
Thank you.
Dan, I would really like them to put draft at the top.
Yeah.
Before they post it.
Yeah.
We've clarified it here in the room, but for all those that come after and look on the web.
Right.
Thank you.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Just around, so I come from the nonprofit world, but I'm not in the legislature, and with federal funding, we have auditing compliance amounts. With state government, what are the requirements or the federal funding?
We
Are they
have the same essentially requirements that are, for any federal grant.
So
And
is there an audit? Are there audits that have been done?
so there's the federal single audit that takes place statewide. So that is the audit that has been done. I think, as for every state agency or department. We did also have some, and Tom, you might be able to describe the more recent thing that happened that I don't know if it was really an audit, but it was sort of a review of our ARPA expenditures and our grant agreements specifically.
Yeah, so what happened is that the things like Clifton out Larson Allen, I don't remember CLA, the auditors, it's the auditing company. So what they did is they went and audited the state of Vermont. So when we get audited, it's not really so much they target BCPP or target certain particular departments. They take a sample of each department. So because the state of Vermont they consider as one entity, even though there's multiple departments, right? So like they take a little bit from each of them. So, and I think like one of the things that they really looked at is just like small things on like grant agreements. So there was like a number that was missing. So we've been proactive. Once we got back those the results of the audit, we've been making those changes to those grant agreements. It was like a number, and I forgot what the number was, but it was like
The ALN number.
Yeah,
the
ALN
assistant
number.
Listing number was incorrect on some of the grant agreements.
so we've been going back and fixing those. So
So that is something. Some more recommendations. To have those, I don't think necessarily be a part of an agenda, but it does feel like something we should see.
I can support that. That makes sense.
We can inform you. We will
Yeah.
inform you.
I have this question. Emergence coming back. So in a reasonable world, so we have a $5.5 million organization. And it has a solid financial staff today. And we have a state auditor who sort of floats in and out. Politically appointed.
Yeah.
And we have this unified audit that includes a lot of other things from a lot of other sources. Is it appropriate as a board that we would want an audit of our own for this organization? It isn't in the budget we just passed, but I think it's worth at least considering, and I don't know I don't know where that would, if that would be consistent with other or groups like ours. I don't have that parallel. But, if even every other year we had, it would prepare us for questions raised by others. Now, having said that, only somebody with financial experience could say whether we're even auditable, given the complexity, or what did you call it? The density, the density of our domain. I don't think we're necessarily more complicated than, some other complex service provider, but I just wonder about that. Given our role as a board, it's something to consider.
I presume all the CUDs also are being.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that we might be able to get for you is our federal programs, so the NTIA programs that are a little bit more complex than the ARPA funded program. They do program audits, which includes just a review of the financial systems, the operational systems, the grant, like everything that we do, and they might be able to provide the report
Is it
out.
sampling or is it, here's Vermont?
This is like for our programs to our federal funders. So we have to submit all of our, so it's not a financial like audit necessarily because we do reporting and that's kind of what we do with them, but it's a look at our systems we're using for financials and for reporting and for operations. So I would assume they do that and have a report that we could probably provide to you.
I really want to support the notion that Holly has put on the table, which is this thinking about a more formal auditing process for us allows us to kind of be in charge of we understand what's happening, and that's not for someone else to identify if there's an issue. So I don't know if that's something we can ask staff to come back to us on in terms of a proposal.
Yeah, I support that too.
Be happy.
Look into and see if
I agree. You want to know, you want to know early.
we can amend the budget.
Yeah, we all want.
We could amend the budget, and it's not to say that we don't think everybody's doing a good job.
Right.
Don't misunderstand.
We don't
It's
get it.
actually a prophylactic measure
Yes.
to avoid, yeah.
I support you 100%.
And it's
a best
only,
practice that we don't have in
Yep.
place, then we can, gives us another second set of eyes to guide us.
and it's part of becoming institutional as opposed to entrepreneurial.
We're
And
ready,
also-
we're ready for this.
I think.
One other,
Wait, Dan has
But
comments.
let's do Laura then, Dan.
Christine, I just, does staff have a policy around the CUD audits? Do you see those? Are you made aware of any findings?
Yes.
It would be good to understand what the policy is around that.
Yeah, they're required to do an audit every year.
So is that something you can share with us maybe at the next meeting?
It's in that
What's-
list.
We want to do confident. We'll probably want to do that confidential.
Actually, no, those should be public.
Well, I guess
documents.
maybe it should be.
I'm asking about the process.
Yeah.
I'm not asking about
Okay.
findings. I'm asking what's the process?
We can present. that.
Yes, we have that.
I'll work. I'll work.
That is our new FY25 grantee plan.
Yeah. Yeah, we got through that
Could even
whole
have John in here. He wrote it.
Okay, Dan, you're up.
Well, I was just going to comment along the lines of a controls audit. I'm not sure what you had in mind when you were supporting the idea, but I can get behind a controls audit, but to go around and do a financial audit seems like we're handling hundreds of millions of dollars, but I think the real risk is with the CUDs. And by doing a controls audit, you at least get a chance to see where you could go wrong and give opportunity for correction. I mean, we're not going on a witch hunt. We're just trying to make everything better and posture ourselves defensively, right?
Yes.
Well, Dan, even a full financial audit would only be sampling. So, I think we could do a controls audit as an initial first step. But I'm not entirely sure that an audit isn't an appropriate thing, but I'm not sure. I hear you. It could be a big burden.
I think it could be expensive, and I think we're trying to find ourselves in the CUDs in compliance.
Yeah.
And an audit may not actually have that tendency. So for the sake of supporting the CUDs in a positive way by doing a controls audit gives them the opportunity to find those areas of risk, like was stated earlier. It's like, oh, we can't do this in QuickBooks, so we need to find a more mature way and help them find that path forward. It's just a
But
recommendation.
Dan, are you thinking the audit of the VCBB would include an audit downstream to the CUDs? They're doing their own.
Yes, and
the
complexity of our work here, which is why I go to a controls audit. The complexity of our work, I think, is far less than the CUDs. So I don't think we need to go into a full audit, but instead of controls, financial audit, but instead of controls audit.
Of the VCBB.
Yes.
Right, Christine, you have food for thought. You guys
Yeah.
chew it over, you guys being staff, chew it over.
I would
Come back to
I'll
us with
take
a
all this at
recommendation.
advisement at this point.
Exactly.
And then we'll come back.
Come back with a recommendation.
And Dan would probably give you some feedback on what he thinks of in the scope of the controls audit. Make sure you're talking to us apples and apples.
All right.
So we
That belongs in the parking lot.
Yeah,
Where are we?
consider that.
We have two more slides here.
Okay.
And only one slide has numbers on it, which is helpful. This is a little bit of a summary, but really gets into what we need to do now. So we have $148.7 million in our SFR funds obligated, and we need, with the remaining SFR funds that we have allocated, not obligated to CUDs, we can make up that difference so that we have the final 1.274 million obligated. If CUDs and other grantees are able to apply for those funds in a timely manner to get them obligated as part of their grant agreements. So I'm going to skip forward to the recommendations slide, but I want to go back to this with questions. So overall, our recommendation would be allow CUDs and other grantees to apply for remaining allocated funds for pre-construction materials or construction. So the idea here is really merging those allocations, so they don't need to say, oh, I only have pre-construction funds left, but what I really need are construction funds. They know what they need, and they can apply for those remaining allocated funds for any of those three purposes. And again, encourage the CUDs and other grantees to apply for remaining funds by no later than August. Yeah.
On the bottom, where is that coming? What is that?
Yeah, so that's personnel costs that we have charged against ARPA. So we plan to charge no more than 100,000. I mean, right at this point, like we're not planning, as I understand it, we're not planning to charge any more admin costs to ARPA, but it's based on what's amount that's currently right now, it's about like we've expended about around 75,000, just like a little bit over that. So we put a little bit of buffer.
So as of July 1, we wouldn't actually be, are we doing that, making that change as of July 1? We're probably not charging anymore.
Well, I think as of right now, we're not
Yeah, we're not
charging,
charging.
yeah.
We're allowed to spend with ARPA
Mhm.
on admin stuff. And so $100,000, another one for the report.
So 150 and is it 95 is 245. 245 million. One thing for our first line. So
Yep.
I'm wondering about that when we come back.
So
to
this is just, for the 245 million would include the CPF funds, which this doesn't get into the planned CPF spending.
But between the SFR and the CPF, that would be 245.
So we actually have some unallocated funds in our CPF.
Okay.
So about 2.6 million or rounding up to 2.7 million.
And then the obligated and planned 150.
Yeah, so
plus.
it is slightly higher than 150 million, and that is to the best of my knowledge, because when much of this planning actually occurred, the understanding with the staff at the time was that there was basically admin funds on top of the 150 million. So the understanding at the time, and this is like a few years ago, as far as I know, was that there were 151.5 million in ARPA funds. So you'd see like we're a little over 150 million in quote of our planning. However, those funds are not yet obligated, and because we still have unallocated funds in our CPF pot of funds, you know, that's one of the reasons why we are encouraging folks to be able to apply for whatever they need the funds for. So we could easily say, a great example here is Otter Creek. If they applied for $559,111, we could easily pay for that out of CPF, and then would be almost to zero on 150 million.
Just to go back to it, another reason that happened is we had a construction grant out of CPF and all the pre-construction was out of SFR, but then we had a materials allocation that we had to take from construction to move to pre-construction. We were all of a sudden moving money that was intended for CPF into SFR. So that's.
Okay, so I think we had agreement, Patty, that, and Christine, that this slide was going to come back.
Yep.
Yes.
With a lot more clarity.
Yep.
And matching.
Yes, and I've already begun working on extended version of this slide, which will have planned CPF as well as planned SFR.
Thank you.
So the game plan is you're going to reach out to each entity and say, this is what you have remaining. And if they don't apply by the end of August, that the timeline?
We were gonna ask them in July if they intended to apply, and we would ask for applications to come in during August. We may not be able to hear all those applications immediately. They will be all amendments, which is helpful. But it's we don't want to put a deadline on for us making the approval. But we want to
Any
get the
money
process
that's
started.
left on the table is open season.
Well,
That
I'd say
is
that Rob has a proposal for that.
That's something we'll bring back a more formal proposal. The first part of it was that if we need it for match, since making sure everybody can access the BEAD program is really our number one priority. And we'll go from there, but let's see where we're at first.
Let it not go unsaid that another approach, since BEAD accounts for costs of drops and other connection costs, if we had 2 million unobligated under ARPA, we could use that for affordability connection money. And we could have a little grant program where you bring us, or you bring staff, a qualified household, and where a defined needy family is being served, there are funds to address that need.
I agree with you 100% on that, Holly. We're already considering that for the connectivity initiative. And we would be bringing a proposal forth. There's only so many proposals we can throw at you.
Is that connectivity initiative?
There's funds in there that remain that we haven't spent. That's probably, I don't know what the exact figure is right now, but it's between 1 and 2 million. not to narrow it down, but
Yeah.
that we were looking to be using as a
And
drop.
that's neither ARPA funding nor beyond.
Exactly. So they could be potentially paired together too. We were looking at for long drops underground and possibly even focusing in on manufactured home communities. So we are thinking ahead in terms of those types of things. We just haven't got there yet.
Can
to
that be
bring it
considered match as part of BEAD? Those drops? We fund those.
No, those addresses are already. It's,
Already.
let's not go
That's
there.
gonna make it really complex.
Yeah, sorry.
There's additional to the CBB.
Yes,
The bill
USF.
was that was passed this
Yep.
year.
USF, our USF
That would
funds
start for not this fiscal year, but the following
following
fiscal
year.
year.
Our USF funding goes from about 700,000 a year to 1.2 billion.
I don't.
And you're saying that
That
can
would be
used for
2026
specific
budget.
grant
Well,
provisions.
yes, when we think about affordability and drops and all of the things and what we might need in the future.
Yeah, we will, by 2026, we'll have a good solid understanding of that extra fund comes in the 2026 budget. Not the two.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to bookmark that though for when we do have a discussion about government affairs. You don't want to.
Yep.
So there's no action required.
Well, I
Is that
think
true?
we'd like you to support. I think I'd like a resolution that in the blue,
You would like a motion?
a motion that says in the blue.
Combining the different programs.
So I think that motion needs a specific drop dead date for to our grant application for remaining allocated funds. I didn't track, frankly, with all of it could be either or pre-construction or because Act 71 specifies those programs for different purposes. So what you're essentially saying is, oh, if we were wrong, we shouldn't have allocated those monies under those programs, or
I think what we're, if I may, no, what we're saying is that rather than having to say that, oh, I only have $200,000 left for pre-construction, but I have all this other money over here, that the grantees can use it for what's going to help move them towards sustainability.
And help us get those funds obligated in times
Yes.
that are not leaving money on the table. Because it's gonna be a huge lift for us to get just the grant amendments out on time, to have to do a whole nother set of amendments to merge or break down the walls.
I get all that. What I'm asking is a legislative question.
They didn't set specified amounts to each program in the legislation.
Right,
Yes.
Yeah. I was gonna say
Yes.
that.
Good answer.
Yeah.
There's no set amount for pre-construction or
First, we're better
construction.
at reading
We're
minds.
not, yeah, thank you. We're not rewriting legislation by
Yeah.
making that reallocation. Okay.
Laura has the table.
So is this you're asking for a formal motion here? So I am uncomfortable with a formal motion until that slide comes back and makes, and it jives. And so can you help me understand the time constraints?
So can I ask you this question? Because it says remaining allocated funds. Even if they change the actual number, a motion that just said remaining allocated funds would apply to whatever the number actually is. Would that be okay?
I would be more comfortable making that motion with slide that we understood.
That's correct.
That was more clear. But I would be happy to understand if there are time constraints between, like that, make that, what is the difficulty in not doing that till July? Making that motion until July.
I would say the only difficulty is just allowing the CUDs and other grantees to have certainty as they develop what they want to use those funds for.
Make grant amendments.
Right, that's what it comes down to. If we're asking them to tell us like, oh, are you going to use these funds by the end of July? Well, it might matter if it's going to be one bucket or if it's going to be 3 buckets.
So I would even be willing to attend a half an hour with a cleaned up to make this motion. I can't today. So I don't know what the imperative is with the CDs. If they would rather.
I mean, I'm gonna ask you again, does staff really need a motion on this? for you to say to the CUDs, this is what we have on our balance sheet left for you. Isn't that kind of staff's job to do that?
Well,
I
Yeah,
don't see that we have to take action.
yeah, that slide is a separate slide from, oh, wait, say what you said, I don't.
I'm learning with you too, but I believe in the plan column here, you have the allocations by CUD. What's not on the slide is these secret buckets that they were originally allocated to. So I think if you simply pass a motion that the secret buckets no longer exist, that all the authority already exists to apply for the grant funds. Am I right about that?
I don't understand.
Yes, they can apply. All we have to do is remove the allocation category.
Correct.
Yes, it doesn't
Because
change the amount.
allocation amount is
It's already
the
been made.
sum total.
Yep.
And so they're applying for the funds, they're already allocated.
I don't think you need a motion on this.
Well,
I don't see
to
if
the
there's a
extent that the board approved, whether it was pre-construction or construction funding, that's the problem.
Yes.
And the board did do that?
Yes.
And that's what they are.
Yes.
And I,
So
That's why we.
Break down the
So-
walls here.
So I move, not to muddy the water for you, but I move that the board agree that the remaining ARPA funds not be subject to construction and pre-construction allocation requirements
And materials.
and materials. Oh, that's the
Three
third
different
bucket.
categories, yeah.
Okay. So have I said the right words though?
It's a set of the details of the.
Yeah, I think so, because actually it's not so much what the balance is, it's
Yeah.
what the
It's what-
label is. It's the
Yeah.
label
It's the
attached to
label.
it, that's the problem.
Let's look at that motion.
Essentially, we're trying to get rid of the subcategories within the CUD. That's just what
Yeah.
we're trying to get.
Yeah, and they're forced to do it because we approved it in the first place.
So, okay, so it's been made and seconded.
Yep.
Dan,
Discussion?
so, I really do not want to vote for this just because, so
You can vote no.
if it's 3-1, that would be
Okay,
Me.
no,
happy to be,
abstain.
no.
I was I'm sorry.
Dan,
I was thinking that the notes our minutes could reflect our position without having a formal motion and approval.
Tony clarified that we took action at a prior meeting, that we specified SFR and CPF.
No, we specified
No,
pre-construction versus construction.
That's all right, that's what we specified. We took action that has boxed the money in two compartments, and we're basically taking action now to unbox it.
to the remaining amounts.
Yes.
Just for the remaining amounts to meet the obligation deadlines.
and I could even
Does that make sense,
show an
Dan?
example.
Yeah,
Um,
it does.
Right, are we, any more discussion? Let's call the motion.
I will say, however this motion comes out, I really appreciate what Laura is saying about needing to know the actual allocations having a fraction on the
Agreed,
slide.
agreed, we still want you to come back and.
Different thing.
You can add that to the motion, that we report that back.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
I don't want to amend the motion.
Well, staff come back with that information.
Yeah, I mean, it's already stated that that's what we're
Yeah.
supposed to do.
Right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Is opposed?
No.
Okay, 3 are yes, and 1 is no. Motion carries.
My no, just to be very clear, is just around the connection to that slide. So
Yeah.
I just needed to.
It's legit.
Yeah, makes sense.
Christina and Tom.
This has been quite an adventure. And I will say that what Tom has been great, since we're done with that portion of the meeting, you know, like all of the transactions that have happened are in our state accounting system, Vision. So Tom is able to extract all of that money. What I have found is that I am now creating one master spreadsheet for me and everybody else to be able to understand the information that are in our PDF grant agreements and in our Vision accounting system. But those, like, the data exists there. It's all about collecting the data and making sure that it makes sense in a spreadsheet. And that is what I am currently working on.
Thank you.
I would just like to say that you're making it make a lot more sense.
We're getting there.
We're getting there.
That's why
We're
I'm
getting
trying
there. So
to recruit.
please take that.
Thanks,
as-
Melissa.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you want to take a look?
Yeah, and I agree that we're not all the way there. Yeah.
Well, and
I
you're also
agree.
tying off in a way that we're going to
Mhm.
see if we've got any divots.
Yeah.
Okay, we have
Mhm.
2 more items added to the agenda, which is forward. Point 1, which is Tony's memo on E4. Holly, you added this?
Yeah, Tony, you identified that there was a conversation, I believe, with NTIA that encouraged the state of Vermont to change its rate floor, that's an obligation under BEAD grants.
Yes.
Could you just tell us the story that's recited in your memo?
Well,
We have
just,
the memo? Sorry, we have the memo?
Yes, it's in your email.
yes, just that there was a request that came through to Christine and to the governor's office. Christine could probably talk more on the details of the actual conversations. I was not involved in those. But the bottom line is that with the expiration of the ACP, there were concerns about the floor of our low-cost option being too high at 45. And the $30 floor is actually what the model was for in the NOFO for the BEAD program. This was a model that NTIA had developed at the time they did the NOFO, and that they strongly encouraged. They put guidance out, strongly encouraging all states to adopt the $30 floor. And as I think some of you are certainly aware, that floor is currently, I mean, it's not officially a floor, but that amount is currently being offered by some ISPs, or at least one ISP. But in any event, the bottom line is this was strongly encouraged by NTIA. It's in accordance with their model, and our BEAD program $45 rate was based on the existence of ACP. So it wasn't the kind of variable that we could, figure out alternatively, because it's such a big slug, right, of funding. So we didn't really have an alternative built into our initial proposal, even though we knew there was a danger that ACP would expire and not be salvaged. But so that's really what's happening is everyone's recognizing the fact that the ACP is in fact a dead letter at this time. And so it's an attempt to try to focus everyone on lower rates. And we do feel confident that just having the lower number in there is going to help generate more focus on finding a lower rate.
Yeah, and let me add too, that it has no negative impact to the current plans, because all of we are planning to set these rates based on the applicant's ability to pay in their business plans, which would be a waiver. But what it does do is that if you think about it, you set a floor of $45 and some bidder comes in and says, oh, I can get 45 versus 30, right? This is beyond, if you've got a large carrier that comes in.
Yeah,
we want
to get out of jail free.
Yeah.
We don't want the same provider charging 30 in New York and 45 here
Right,
just because we have a lower base rate.
So it made sense.
So I apologize, I did not review the memo. So I just want to make sure that I understand this is related to our BEAD plan.
Correct. This is our initial proposal,
And
which is now maturing. So this is all
This is part of
formalized.
curing.
Yes.
okay. And then so I want to make sure that I understand the effect. So we have large national carriers that have failed to build to the most expensive parts and have left that for community groups. So that costs more for those community providers. Does setting this at $30, does that disadvantage or advantage the national provider in any way? Or does our plan allow for accommodate both of those things?
Well, I'm probably not the expert on that,
Competitively.
but I can tell you that our plan, as Christine stated, our plan has a range in it that is based on morality or all those factors come in figuring out what the right rate is.
So it allows both of those types of providers to be competitive in our process?
Yes.
Well,
Okay, that's-
actually, I think what I heard Christine say is that because we set our range at 45, it advantages those large providers.
So dropping.
Yes, I'd be careful how we respond to that, but yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that we are not, that it's remaining competitive in terms of the cost of the addresses that are left.
Yes.
So, okay, great, thank you.
So
what's the
Tony.
question, actually? What is the question? Why did you have this?
why, because first of all, I wanted it on in the record that we as a board had heard about it and considered it because it's an important carrying to our proposal. Okay. Secondly, because it impacts our view of affordability overall. But Tony, here's the thing. We're being pretty dependent on this idea that you can come in as a grant applicant under B and based on the sustainable business model that you're proposing, you can obtain a waiver if you can't meet a $30 a month rate. Right so far?
Right.
I understand that the bid process for BEAD is very objective. 75% of it is criteria that are determined by the NTIA. Where is that decision made and by whom? About whether the sustainable business plan can meet a $30 a month affordable rate obligation.
So part of there'll be two places in the BEAD process where that happens. There is an initial round of meeting gating criteria, and there are financial requirements that you have to meet as part of gating, which will involve having to present what your rate plans are.
And staff is reviewing that.
So that's one of the things we're going to work with, probably a contract.
A contract.
So for example, CTC does a lot of that sort of thing right now with us for the ARPA grants. So it would be a similar sort of situation. And then when you get to the actual proposal itself, there's also a review of that plan and the business plan.
Anything else?
Thank you for sharing.
Okay, next added to our agenda was 10.2, which is KPI monthly meetings.
Yeah, we've started the KPI monthly meetings. We're reviewing the KPIs that been approved by the Construction Standards Committee and approved by the board by default. Those will be reviewed verbally monthly, a formal report quarterly to the board. So I'm happy to give you monthly inputs as to how we're doing in general, but you'll see the specific numbers quarterly. And we started those meetings.
I was saying, Patty, I mean, it'd be great. I don't know, maybe it wouldn't be great. It feels like it would be great to start with, how many Vermonters are covered now as a result of
we could
us
give you
being
that next
here,
one.
like at every meeting,
Yeah. We spent all these meetings coming to an agreement on how to present this data, but I think it's safe to say, correct me if I'm wrong, all the CUDs are supportive and we're at the point where we're working. Feel free to disagree if any.
I gotta get closer to the door.
Public comment is coming. So it strikes me that since you have a 3-month wind-up period before you do a board report, that it might be really good to show us at our July meeting, kind of not a report with numbers, but what will the report look like?
Okay.
Yeah, tee it up for us.
Yeah.
Happy to. And I'm also happy to give you a verbal update. We've agreed we would have verbal meetings. But
So the thing is Patty, in my mind, we would want to set the expectation that if the KPIs are happening but you uncover a crisis.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, you wouldn't wait for the quarter.
that's right. That's my point. My point is, when we had that discussion of the Construction Standards Committee, that was where we got to. We said, look, if we're meeting monthly to ensure that everything's on track. If anything's off track, we'll notify the board. We'll certainly work with the CUDs. I would say the first, well, I wouldn't, you can give an update on the first meetings, but from my perspective, they were very, very.
Yeah, I mean, we set what the expectation is going to be and have built that into our reporting platform so they can actually provide it. Essentially, half of the data we've already been getting, which is what have you done? But what we're adding to that is, well, what were you going to plan to do so we can see that delta? And so I would assume any report that you would want would involve that. I don't know if there are other things that you feel like would be valuable in that context.
You know how Laura just said how many Vermonters serve?
Yeah.
Just like McDonald's. Right?
Yeah.
It seems to me.
I think they might double count.
The KPIs are pretty detailed.
Yeah.
So you might want to present to us a what we all think of, or at least I know that Brian and I have had this conversation, kind of a scorecard.
Mm-hmm.
We've asked that several times this week.
Yeah, and it's really about taking that stuff and rolling it up so that we have the metrics that mean the most at the top.
Okay.
So,
Dashboard's pretty.
or dashboard is another scorecard type thing.
And we've been working to make project specific dashboards that roll up to the ones that we have that are program wide dashboards. And we're almost there. I feel like all of the CUDs have been really progressing organizational development wise to the point where now it feels like we all can do what we were hoping to do. And so that's in process, kind of in collaboration with the work that's happening in the monthly meetings.
So Patty, frankly, I forget to go out and look at the dashboard. I actually think it is, to me, as we get more institutionalized, the dashboard and the scorecard are what we do. And particularly as we migrate to a bead type format where our input is somewhat limited.
We have it in the board packet before.
Yeah, you have. It's just that we need to keep going there.
We could formally do it as part of the.
Yeah, and if it's not meaningful, then we have to change it's how to make it meaningful.
I think you're hearing a thirst for this information, and we haven't, some on the board feel like we haven't got it yet, so we're looking for that and we're keep on.
Well, I think it's a natural evolution.
Exactly. We're finally at a point where we can do it. Dan, your hands up.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, big echo coming back at me. So I would just make a recommendation, maybe in the weekly updates, just put a link in there, and that would just be very convenient for the board to take a look. And the other comment I had is, as this matures and gets better, there won't be any surprises because the indicators will be there and we'll see things happening as they occur. So I think it just sort of starts taking care of itself as that all matures.
I think let's talk about it at a couple meetings before we automate it.
Yeah.
So that we are saying, yep, this is what we want. There might be some metamorphosis of that data set. Then once we get to an automated spot, then that would be a great place to link it. It's in the for initially put it on a board agenda.
Or both.
Sooner than later, but at least so we can talk about it. Yep, that's what we want.
We'll come back to the July meeting.
Excellent.
And we're seamless and nodding, so she's carrying the bulk of the load on this. So.
Okay, anything else? Matt. Okay, let's go to number 11, CUDA update.
It's very strange to be in the same room if we've ever done. But happy to be here, and actually it's great to see you all in the same place. So lots of individual activity in the CVs. We've heard some of that in some of the commentary today about progress in construction season, mergers, business plans, planning for the future, et cetera. And I can't highlight all of that. There's a ton of work going on and great work by all the staffs and their volunteers. So I'm just gonna talk about some things Vicuda is doing in our shared services realm. One was that I think we mentioned a couple meetings ago, we've hired a GIS expert, and a number of the CUDs are working with that GIS expert and a couple of data sources that we've been able to acquire to model completing their universal service plans and what that might cost. And so it's kind of an independent, separate analysis of those activities. One of the things that we all know, and it came up in part of your conversation earlier, is these national scale data sets are based on averages. And so they're not wrong, but they're not the same as doing a bottom-up view of what it takes to do some of these activities. So we're running that process the same way using our GIS expert to try and model the top-down and comparing it to our expectations of what it's going to take based on our bottom-up experience. And so that process is underway. Again, a couple CDs are a little farther away along than others in doing that, but we think that's a really exciting activity to help us understand kind of landscape as seen by, for instance, a federal official versus the people doing the work. So we've got a team working on that. FX is leading that and is doing a really great job along with GIS leaders and some of the CDs. We've been working on the Consolidated Communications sale docket, which is happening in the Department of Public Service. A number of the CUDs filed to intervene in that. Vicuda did as well, and the department consolidated us all into one set of comments. I mean, interestingly enough, not all, like so many things, not all our comments or thoughts are identical. And so consolidating a story and engaging in that is interesting. I think for this group, there are two probably interesting things for you. One is that as the company privatizes, there are commitments to spend a lot of money nationally, investment in a new territory. And we asked in our comments not to tell us, the CUDs and potential competitors, what they're planning to do, to make sure they tell the department and you what they're planning to do through their confidential channels, so that the state of Vermont has the full knowledge of what that investment will look like. And then the second place where we really focused energy was on things like make ready and pull attachments and easements and other activities that are important for broadband build out for us and other providers across the state. So if you hear anything about it, we're actually really trying to take the lowest possible profile we can, but these are two issues that we felt were important and we wanted to just hear about as part of the process. And we're looking to take a very low profile in this, but we thought it was important to put those issues on the table. We're getting drawn into interrogatories and all the other parts of that process, filing comments and having comments or a couple of questions sent back to us, and reply comments to those comments, et cetera. But we thought it was important to have those two key issues highlighted. The Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program. So as you know, there are multiple buckets of digital equity. There's the capacity planning grants, there's the grant that came to the state, and then there's a future program that will probably be launched this fall, where nationally nonprofits, providers, all kinds of organizations can apply for a roughly $2 billion pool of money. I think that's right. There's a 1.5. I get all the buckets confused. So we've been working on figuring out if there is a coalition in Vermont of those kinds of folks that wants to apply. Vicuda has kind of led the discovery phase of that, but expect that as a coalition emerges and interested parties of the willing and able who can come to that, come together, that others will help lead and invest in putting together a great application. Last week in Montpelier, there was a meeting, about 40 representatives were there from social service organizations, regional support organizations, foundations, higher education institutions, broadband providers, probably leaving out a couple category, healthcare providers. There are a lot of ideas, and the stage we're at in that is trying to coalesce those ideas into some kind of set of activities that might go forward, and then asking who wants to help lead that effort going forward. But we think that's an important effort. It's still in the discovery phase. Sure. The other big thing Vicuda's been putting a lot of time into is some very rich conversations about affordability and all the different aspects of it. Like all the other things we do, we have a lot of opinions This is critically important to all of the CUDs. But what success looks like and how they get to success is a little different for each one. And so, you know, a lot of the conversations, frankly, were very rich. I wish they were conversations that could play out with you all, both the staff and the board and the CUDs, because I think we all learned a lot during the conversations. There were probably 6 to 8 meetings over the last month on this topic, and I think it was really robust, both on the accountability issues, the grant accountability issue that is very important to you all and to us in terms of, you know, honoring the obligation and the commitment the state's made to fund public broadband and doing that right, but also in recognizing that we need more stakeholders at the table to understand things like where the data is going to come for a program, understand how you're going to administer funds, to understand how, you know, how a program would play out now that the ACP is gone and the data source that was part of that is gone as well. So lots of conversations there. We're eager to continue that conversation with you all and to bring all those pieces together as quickly as we can. We could have elected a new vice chair. Congratulations and welcome Lisa Birmingham for stepping up to the vice chair role. And FX was playing both the secretary and treasurer role, and Krista Shute has now assumed the secretary role for VP as well. So we have a full executive committee. We're excited about that. And then the last thing I have on my list is just, it's really great to be in the same room and to see faces. There are a few people here I've been working with for almost 2 years now, and this is the first time I've seen you in person, so that's great. And I know that's true for everyone. Ultimately, this is a collaborative and family effort, and it's fun to see everyone in the same place. Thank you. If there are any questions I can take.
I just want to thank the CUDs for engaging in the process around the sale. I think that's really, really important. We're at another critical juncture, looking at legacy copper coverage. I certainly am seeing that get worse in our region, and as we are all looking to you to pick up the slack there, I think your voices are imperative. And so thank you for making time to engage in that. And I applaud you all for the great session, trying to find another pathway on the digital equity program, an additional opportunity for Vermont. I attended, thought you guys did a great job putting something together. Hopefully something will work out.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Rob. Last item, or before our executive session with the board, is item 13, parking lot.
Yeah, did you miss
Public comment.
I'm sorry, public comment. I did miss that.
So anybody have any public comment online? Raise your hand online or raise your hand here. 3 minutes to speak. Do we have any public comments? Not seeing. Oh yeah, FX has his hand up. Go ahead, FX.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm a little bit disappointed that in the conversation about the SFR versus the capital projects, you know, it wasn't clear that the reason why that pie is so small now is because the almost $14 million of EC fiber construction grant was moved into the SFR. Now, at the last meeting, or at the April meeting, when the discussion came up about the allocations, the hole that needed to be filled by the end of this year was more on the order of 17 or 18 million dollars. So now you've been presented with a report where our construction grant has been moved in to wipe that away, which is like really ironic because we were the ones who could actually take advantage of the fact that that money needs to be spent this year. So I'm very disappointed that that was not brought up and discussed, by the board. I believe that they should give guidance to the staff to request alternatives for approaching this, which would necessarily involve an alternative whereby we would be able to get additional ARPA money. Sorry for harping on this, folks, but when it's not even discussed, it needs to be said out loud. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, seeing none.
Now we move to parking lot, item 13.
Okay, I will share my screen. Okay, going through the open parking lot items, the board would like an update on the Euclid project. We talked about doing that at the July meeting. That rests on Alyssa's shoulders, but so we'll work on that. Is that too soon, Alyssa?
For UPA?
Just to give an update.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Update from the digital officer on what other states are doing about affordability now at the ACP. Brittany will present that in the July meeting. And then these next items, create cross-referencing between the reporting requirement, the construction standards and policy reporting. That's Tony. Prepare a memo that addresses a conflict that's between the board policies and pre-existing grant agreements. That's Tony. Prepare a memo explaining that they intend the board policies apply to grant holders over and above what the standards applied by FCCS. So, Tony, you have any questions on any of these? Okay.
I don't think we need to go through them if they're in the parking lot and we're just,
Anything new that's been listed?
well, the review of the one slide today.
Yeah, we'll add
No,
those.
I mean,
Karen does a good job of.
Yeah.
There was actually no new ones from the last meeting.
From the last meeting.
Yeah, they were already on the edge. Yeah, all right, that's a good way to handle.
But an item 57, isn't that done now? Check the box.
Yes, we can check that box. Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed that.
And then same as 55.
Yep. Yeah. Hear that.
Do we still need, on 51, do we still need to discuss the application scoring criteria and how that will work for the role of the board going forward? I kind of feel like we need to continue clarification of our role under B. Tony, do you agree with that?
I'm sorry.
I'm looking at, we put on this, number 51 is application scoring criteria policy. It goes all the way back to November.
Yeah, that should be,
Why?
because it's already been done.
But what about the,
Final approval.
okay, so I was applying that entry item to a different task. Under B, the review criteria for grant monies change. Do we have a plan for the board and its authority under the B criteria for grant approval?
Well, I think it's essentially the same paradigm, which is staff is going to be making a recommendation that's going to be based on a highly technical objective analysis, competitive grant program, but it's going to be a staff recommendation to the board. And the board is going to have, very limited discretion in terms of approving the award, but.
Is this correct relative to B? B comes with its own scoring criteria.
Yeah.
So we don't develop it.
I got that.
Set.
So Well, first of all, when does that start to happen?
Okay.
Not this year.
It
will
may
be,
be this later this year.
hopefully, if the timeline holds, it will be later this year.
So I'm just thinking, Patty, that it'd be good for the board to like sit down and actually review the criteria so that we're not the first time the approval process.
So we know what staff's doing.
Yes.
'Cause you've got direction from me to say, here's the
Yeah.
matrix. Educate us on what you're going through, so we don't ask these questions when it comes to review.
There you go.
Sure.
And there's some of them that are subjective or have some more wiggle room.
Yeah.
You should educate us on, if you want us to swim in our lane, you should show us clearly where those parameters are.
Exactly.
So you actually, so this one, the reason it's not closed is we don't have final approval. Yeah, ITI, so we are still waiting for final approval. But I think you're talking about another parking lot.
Yes.
That says, educate you as to what the scoring criteria is as, yeah, yep. Okay.
So this is something I'm actually worrying about along the lines of this, and I've been thinking about during this meeting, which is how do we so this the VCBB was not established by BEAD or to do BEAD. It's got its own tasks, and so how can we and then knowing that we need to be very handed and it's competitive, are we doing enough to differentiate between this is BEAD work and this is not BEAD work?
It's similar.
I thought the presentation that we had, was it last month's meeting?
Yeah.
Was awesome.
It was awesome.
And in addition to that memo that we circulated, did it go to everybody? Tony, there's a.
Yeah, that was the one from April last year directed to me.
Oh, yeah, just a 2-page memo from NTIA, which is extremely clear and concise and to the point. And I was like, oh, this cleared up a whole bunch of questions for me.
Yeah.
Was that circulated to everybody?
I will check. and
Yeah, it did
see.
go to the board.
I think it did.
That's
but-
about BEAD,
Yeah,
and that is not all that we are doing.
understood. But
That's
it's
my point.
defining our role relative to BEAD. I mean, I read that and it cleared up some things for me to say, okay, what my role is based on that information.
When we're talking about BEAD, not all of the time, which is my point. Because
Are there
BEAD
more
is,
things you want us to do?
no, BEAD is a funding program.
Yeah.
VCBB is not BEAD.
Right.
Understood.
So,
You gotta
and
keep
we have,
both on the table.
there are other revenues that come into the VCBB.
Uh-huh,
There are
uh-huh.
other,
Got it.
other staff. The staff is not funded by BEAD. There are, our public affairs outreach would not be driven by BEAD. So, it's just, I want to make sure that we are clear about that and that we're not, all of a sudden, we're just BEAD.
So
We aren't.
another way to say what you're
Yeah.
saying, and I really actually love this, is hypothetically, our agenda should identify the categories in which
I think
this
it'd be
board is
crisper.
active, and then take actions or hear agenda items by category.
I think it would be, I actually feel like it would be more helpful hearing all of the concerns also about making sure that we're very careful around BEAD, that we are kind of trying to distinguish as much as we can when we are doing BEAD work and when we are not.
Yeah, and I think, let me, if you might add to that. We've talked about this with staff. I think we need to come back, I think it's on the parking lot. We need to come back with formally what the board's role. We do believe there's a board role in accountability for BEAD. We had BEAD, the governor assigned BEAD to the VCBB.
That's the board.
Which is the board, right?
Yes.
So we've talked about, but I think we can work.
Well, we
on
have to know that you're doing what you're supposed to do.
Right,
We
right.
have to know if there's any room for us to be making additional comments, but, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on our news. Ginny might help us in framing these agendas, and it would be a great learning exercise for Ginny to identify those categories in which we're actively obligated to engage. So administration of the VCBB, our ARPA Act 71 funding and grant compliance,
USF.
BEAD money,
State compliance, I think is.
USF funding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Laura could help identify that, because if we set those criteria out, we won't become, as I think Laura rightfully anticipates, BEAD is the new shining object. And it's so complicated, so dense, that we're going to easily be consumed by it, which we cannot be.
Yeah, I mean, the state of Vermont, the legislature and the governor established goals and how we plan to move forward in the state, which is not exactly the same as BEAD, which has its own rules. And so, you know, how do we move forward with both things? Because we're actually not giving up this other thing. So how do we make sure
I
that we're
think-
being Chris?
I think from a compliance standpoint.
Yeah.
The KPIs apply. You
I
know, so
don't know what that is.
in other words,
Whether it's BEAD or.
whether it's BEAD or ARPA funds, the board has established some policies
Yeah.
that will apply. And that reporting policy that we talked about here in terms of KPIs, that's the gold standard for how we should measure our grant performance, whether it's a BEAD grant or an ARPA grant. We do have an obligation.
KPIs are not everything, though.
No, they're not. And there's some pretty
Yeah, no,
specific,
not everything.
there's some
Yeah,
pretty
I agree.
big distinctions
Yeah.
between, you know, like there are speed and technology distinctions.
Can we just put
between-
this on the
Yeah,
parking
yeah,
lot?
I think that's where we're going.
And we need to have a
Yeah.
conversation and then decide how to crystallize it.
Yeah, I think that,
Yeah,
I
it'll be
I think
helpful.
that's- yeah.
We're not trying to shoehorn everything into one bucket
Right.
that we're acknowledging there's two. Or more.
Yeah, all right, so it really is an extension of that Act in 71 differential responsibilities, yep, okay. Got it,
We have already done number 35.
yes, we have done number 35, yeah, I wrote that down. Okay,
On the other hand, Groschner has not gotten around to number 40, and she should be reprimanded.
Take that up in executive session.
I'm gonna reprimand you.
Okay, our last item before we close up is a standing item for the board to go to executive session. and talk about.
Are we leaving to do that, or are we going to kiss everybody goodbye?
Yeah, you can go to the next meeting. You'll just need to call Dan.
We can also just leave.
Yeah, we can.
I'll just leave.
At this point.
Are we inviting anyone into executive session?
Tony? All right, so I'm gonna make a motion, we move into executive session for 1 VSA section 833, authorizing the public body to hold an executive session to consider personnel.
Second.
Thank you, Holly. Discussion.
So great to see you, everyone. See you again.
Bob and I will go to the office, you can call me back.
Guys have it, executive session.
Okay. She knows.